It is April 11th, 2018, and I'm calling the Board of Health meeting to order. Before we have one appointment at 7:30 to go over a preliminary building application, and then we have a number of other items that we'll be discussing. But before we get to that, I'm going to announce any items, and we will be voting on this, any items to be added as they were not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance of the meeting. We have two items. One is review of food establishment inspection reports received from the food inspector, and the other is a septic tank relocation request for our approval. Anything else come in since this was prepared?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, anyone else have anything?
Nope.
Okay, so do we have a motion to add these two items to the agenda?
So moved.
Second, and all in favor? Aye. Are you voting? or-
Oh, aye.
Okay,
Sorry, I was just reading Joe.
all right.
Madam Chairman,
Yes,
my understanding is for items to be added after 48 hours, they have to be of an emergency nature. Not just that they were received late, but that they have to be addressed because they are emergency in nature and they have to need to be addressed in a timely fashion. What's the emergency about reviewing food inspections?
and do we need to do, does it have to
Well,
be
you
an
know, you
emergency?
don't, I'm not aware that it has to be an emergency. Any of the agent business, I was told, can be added at any time because it's agent work. It's not,
Well, okay. Open
Right,
meeting
it's
law-
not a-
Open meeting law says that if it's not on the agenda, it has to be because it's time sensitive.
Well, I do believe the septic tank relocation probably qualifies. And reviewing food inspection reports, I also view as just part of keeping track of the status of things, as opposed to, I agree with you.
I just want you to, announce that, it is necessary because they are timely, that food inspections, if there are violations that have to be recognized and corrected, it's important. But again, I just remind you that, it should be of an emergency nature, not just because it's inconvenient.
I
Okay.
was told by the Attorney General's office, the Division of Open Government, that for agent work can be added up to the meeting.
Oh, and this food inspector is also an agent.
Yes,
Thank you.
that's been rolled in. Oh, I didn't.
We can erase that part from the table. Or I'd like, I don't care.
So, that's fine. No, but we don't ever add like a policy discussion or something. Okay. So we have 6 minutes before our first appointment, so, well, let's talk about the food inspections. There are just a few. And the food inspector had relayed information to Ellen that she's been doing the inspections, tracking some things that were deficient, and has seen all of these through to a compliant state. So,
And you'll see on her report where she lists the deficiencies, but then she notes the reinspection and that they're now okay.
right, so she has the different dates of different things and when they were taken care of, so. Which actually is part of what's working out nicely now that we have the other agent who is focusing on food inspections and is able to come and work on that more frequently than when we had the outside food inspector who lived rather far away, so it's a lot easier to follow things more closely. So one of the important ones was Sweet Meadow Farm stand. Rustic Pizza was looked at, Sherborn Market, and Pilgrim Church.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
the
Were you
church
there?
kitchen.
Well, insofar as I was never made aware of it, I'm I'm in charge of the church kitchen, so the church has never made a very problem, so just a check. It could have been real serious.
There were no
No
violations.
No violations, so,
I thought
yeah.
you were talking
No, it just,
it had to be.
Oh,
these are-
no.
no,
Just
these are just the
who
inspection
was
sheets.
inspecting?
Yeah.
Good.
All there was is a sodium
You
posting.
wouldn't believe how careful I am about all those thermometers and such.
Okay, good, and it shows, so. Okay, let's see. What else have we got for just a few minutes? So assume you're here about the 6 Maple? Yes. Okay, all right. We'll get to that in a moment. Let's see. Gee, nothing is, oh, any agenda items for next time, for 5-3, and I have to double check.
Wait, is it 5-3 because,
Thursday. It's gonna be
okay,
Thursday.
on the site, it hasn't been updated.
On the website?
Yeah. I checked it today. It said 5-2.
Yeah, I
on
looked
It
Board
still
of-
said 5-2?
Yeah.
On the,
I
oh,
maybe I
no,
did-
on the sheet that lists the
Yeah.
days
Like
for
the
the whole year?
2018 days, it says
Yeah.
5, yeah. At least when I checked it, it said 5-2.
Maybe I didn't save when I made the
Yeah.
correction.
So you might,
Okay.
you might want to
Yeah,
fix
because I
that.
just made one correction
Okay,
today.
so that might take care of that senior awards night, which would,
What might?
Was that 5-2?
the 5-3, but somehow I feel this might be graduation.
Oh, it won't be that early. They're still
Oh,
doing.
May, oh,
Yeah,
June,
yeah,
June,
yeah.
June,
I was like,
June.
what are you
Okay.
talking about?
I don't know.
There's APs going on. It's like the day before prom or something.
You're right, it is.
So you don't have another meeting until May 3rd?
Yeah.
Yeah, because April vacation week and then town, there was a town meeting, and then we have the town election between our 2 meetings in May.
Oh, so it's the June meeting that is.
Right, so we have the town
conflict
meeting is in, at the end, the last week in April.
Okay.
with the senior awards night, so,
June 6th is the meeting.
it might be. Okay, so at some point I have to check, but,
June 6th is
I'm
a
not-
Wednesday.
yeah, I'm not coming if it's senior awards night, so,
Well, we have a little time, so.
yeah, we might.
So-
Either you guys can have fun, or we could change to another night.
And then 5/16 is the date that Scott Horsley said he can
Oh, he can.
commit to. So we
Okay.
can
Okay.
talk to him prior to that. So why don't we,
Schedule
Make that
him
real.
for
Okay.
7:30. I'll make him 7:30.
yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
appointments yet
oh,
for
good.
that night.
The 5/16 meeting, Scott Horsley, the mounding evaluation.
great.
Yeah. I sent him an email today, and I'm like, here are our 2 meeting dates. Which one can you make?
I wonder if he would rather 7 o'clock, maybe
Well, he's driving from the Cape.
tentatively
Make
do
it-
that, but, right,
Or
because he
maybe
has
you
to
wanna say
drive home. He might wanna
7:15?
7:15.
start-
Let's just-
yeah.
Yeah,
We'll
because
split
you
the
have to
difference.
read the agenda, do the
Sure.
agenda.
Yeah.
All
That's
right.
true. Okay. Okay. Let's see, and what else might we have coming up?
The next meeting, May 3rd, there are 2 variance hearings already scheduled. Just for your information.
Okay. Yeah, I can't think of anything else other than the continuation of some of the things that we're gonna be talking about tonight. So, okay, so as soon as Mark comes back,
I'm gonna pull this lot up on Google Earth because I need it to see it like in my brain.
oh,
You know what I'm
the
saying?
6 Maple,
Yeah, I mean, the
Yeah.
plan is not great.
right,
So,
I agree.
Earth.
Although if it wasn't so dark, we could run over there.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll put in 6.
Okay.
Zooming in.
And we don't have any minutes yet, so we don't have that, and we'll just do the paperwork later. There's nothing short.
This isn't helping. Like, where? So there's Sherborn Town Hall.
It is
So
there.
it's on this side?
Yeah,
Wait, where's where's
So-
Amy Davidson's house?
yeah, that white dot there.
This is
Yeah.
her house, so are they the next lot?
So if this is the perspective that you have now, so Washington,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's to go back in here.
Oh,
and
so
then
is
it
this
wiggles
Amy's
it
house?
through. Yeah.
Okay.
So it goes back through, and then it ends up, I'm pretty sure the house ends up back there.
So this is that dirt road, or is that?
It might be.
Yeah. Looks like there's a car parked in it. Or is that their driveway?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. You know, if there's multiples or just the one, or.
So where's the house that exists now? Is that this one, 8 Washington?
I don't think there is one on the property, so.
On either?
Help you on that if you,
Yeah.
it's, 8 Washington and 6 Maple.
Okay, so I pulled it up in Google Earth, and so that's the Davidson's house, you know, that's right on the
This is
corner.
Maple right here, the dirt road goes down this way behind
Is
these
this,
homes.
is this the dirt
In
road?
fact, we walked up to do the soil testing by the pool, that's 8 Washington Street right
So
here.
this is the existing house?
Yes, and
Okay.
they tested way in the back, and on that, where the jog is in the property line,
Mm-hmm.
they tested here, here, and way over on Maple Street. And I believe it was right in here, but it was not.
Closer to
suitable.
Maple. And so where's the lot line for?
I have a large map.
Yeah, that would be better, because I'm like pulling it up on,
Are you
on
Mark?
Google
Yes, I'm
Earth.
Mark.
Hi, Mark. I spoke to you.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were here for that,
That's
so.
okay. Sorry.
Just move that.
So the testing here failed, and the testing here is what I'm requesting to continue. For a monitoring well that had too much water in it on the down slope, and the sort of the septic was laid out with 5 fins this way.
So,
It's deep in the
Is it like-
woods.
over here somewhere? Like, that's the 8 Washington.
Kinda hard to determine the
Yeah, it's back in
change
the
over just in
woods.
the
Back
woods.
here.
Okay, and that, the dirt road is like right here. Is that the?
Yeah, where's Zion Lane? Can we see that?
Zion is living with that.
Science, yeah, up.
It's the back of this, Zion Lane's right here.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure that's right there. Zion. Okay, so,
Thanks. Oh, so you giving me your phone?
Oh, yeah, no, I just was like,
I'm teasing. It's nice to have Google Docs.
it is.
Google
Oh, I
Maps.
just put it on my.
all right, so, do
So-
you want to explain just
Well,
about
I was-
the
Wow.
testing issue?
I was out there with the engineer a couple of years ago now, and indeed, he was taking the data back, and we still have to examine how we determine groundwater adjustments, but in the case of our load of soil test apps, we don't have many. The season has been wet with all the snowstorms and rainstorms. I would suggest for all applicants, as we've done before, maybe it's up to the board, but I would suggest extending the season to allow applications in up to April 15th for new construction, and ending the season, I have to check my calendar. I'm not for sure when April 30th ends. It ends on a Monday, so I would suggest the season go till May 5th, which is a
The
Saturday.
end of that week.
The end of that week. That way, there's time to schedule if someone comes in the 15th. So that would be my...
Just because of the hydrogeological conditions.
Yes,
And precipitation.
and we've done that in the same basis. I can't
Extended
make it
it.
site-specific for any one person,
Mhm.
because it wouldn't be fair to any other applicant, so I'm suggesting we do it as
What
a...
if the weather is such that it's caused problems with being able
Oh,
to go
the
out
snow is,
there and
yes, it has.
too muddy?
Muddy, wet, I have two people at this present time trying to install septic systems that they opened them up and water came pouring in, so at the bottom of them where we expected it, but it's that high. The water table in certain areas is that high. Other areas it's not, but we find that testing right now, in fact, I prefer
It's
if people would
conservative.
wait, because we had testing where they should have waited another month so they could do the perks. The last
'Cause it's already
two,
saturated.
yeah, the last 2 or 3 sites I've been to, at least the last 2, we couldn't do percolation tests because the groundwater was that high, and so they take the soil to bring to a lab. So that's my knowledge of knowing how high the
Groundwater,
high groundwater.
barriers, though?
Well,
Or is
it's-
it because the ground is frozen underneath?
It's a little bit of, I don't think the ground's frozen. We haven't seen that in our soil testing, but it's definitely perched, and it's running on top of hotter soils and tighter soils. So, and we've had sufficient rainfall and snowfall that we are in our high groundwater season. Extending it 1 week would not, in my view, be a concern, as well as extending the season to end on April Friday. When do we usually end it on when we've done it
Usually
before?
April 30th.
Yeah, well, if we do it then,
So
I
the
only have a
15th
week.
Would be
15th's on
Sunday?
a Sunday, so I suggest
Maybe the
maybe the 16th. So that way I have 2 weeks to 3 weeks to get those scheduled if it's new construction,
I think
Okay.
that sounds reasonable.
and then allow the season for new construction for groundwater review to go up till May 5th.
Okay.
That would be
So
my
then that
suggestion.
takes care of the issue of
They would be able to apply it, so would anyone else that is
Location
planning new
and how it-
construction.
fits with the prior testing and all the rest. Okay.
And there,
So-
yeah, that's why I would suggest try to keep it keep it so it's not site-specific.
Right.
Now, the only issue I could think of is conservation.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll have to go to conservation, and will conservation have time?
Well, if we get a gigantic snowstorm, such as we have in years past, on April 1st, we got 2 feet back 15 years ago, that could curtail conservation. I will be back to talk with the board if that happens, because obviously that's going to raise the groundwater again, as well as curtail the conservation agents from determining wetlands, so.
But if they require that an applicant go to their meeting and not have it be
Oh,
an
then that's-
administrative approval, if it's
May
a,
not, right.
yeah,
Yeah.
it may
And this
not.
has,
give
doesn't
enough
it have
time.
wetlands?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
That you have to pass through and all the rest,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, there's
So
an
this
old-
may be a big deal.
Yeah, there's an old
for
farm
evaluating.
road, which is pretty, well intact, and despite all of the growth on the property, in fact, the path has not seen any growth, so you can tell it's pretty compacted. And there's 2 crossings, one is a culvert, which is, fieldstone, it's boxed in. When you look underneath, it's really well intact, it looks like it's double capped fieldstone, and the engineer said there was an excavator that crossed it, no problem.
We were out there prior, and they were using that farm, the old farm
And then
road.
there's one stone crossing on the second brook, which is in a little less good condition. It's
So here's
just
one.
fieldstone capped without earth on it like the other crossing.
But Ellen brings out a good point. Have you contacted the conservation agent to see how fast they can work to give us the approval to set a soil test date?
I wanted to know how you would like me to apply.
So that's the question, if they apply now, can they submit their application to us? Go to,
But we just
won't
hold
be
it.
able to
We-
act on it
We hold it
until it
until we
has-
get conservation, that's what I'm saying. If
It's a good point.
conservation comes back and says, oh, they have to, this is gonna require an RDA or a notice of intent, I don't know.
You may
um,
miss the season.
Then it might not be
Until
able to
I assume
happen.
that
fall.
this season until
Okay.
fall, frankly, I just want
Oh.
to make sure that I'm applying, because I.
You said, can we renew the
Can we
previous
renew or-
application, or should we just start over?
Right, because
Yeah.
I am the end user, whereas the previous applicant was the previous owner.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So what do you
What
think?
could
Should be a
happen
new-
is, by applying, you have monitor wells out there still, so we could go out and evaluate
Sample.
those through the next few
Yeah,
weeks.
Chang was out a few weeks back when I
Yeah.
retained him.
So now-
He tested the 3, and the 2 that, I guess, purportedly passed, passed again, his little finesse tester, and the one that was bad again, so.
Yeah, it's a matter of where groundwater is found.
Depths of water.
It's,
Yeah.
and again, I would have to sit down with him to review his groundwater adjustments. He used Westford, which I've never seen used as a comparison well from the USGS. But it would give us that opportunity to open it up again, to go out and check the monitor wells together, the engineer and I, with an application in, with no work to be done except walking on the site. And then if conservation can allow you to get back in if you need to with an excavator, you just noted you don't mind waiting till the fall.
I mean, I
November,
think we
yeah.
assumed that we were gonna miss the deadline.
Okay,
So,
okay.
It's not a change.
It would be a lot to get done between
Yeah,
now
I
and
think it would be rushed. I
May
don't
5th.
really think it's rushing.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, and in terms of whether it's a continuation, since they're a new user, Ellen, administratively,
Yeah.
what's the best way to proceed on that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just submit a new application and fee.
And would you require full building plans as you indicate in the regulations? Because I don't know the size of the house until we know size.
Not for soil
Not for
testing.
soil
This is
testing.
just a testing phase at the moment, as
You're
opposed
not
to the septic
designing the
design,
septic
right?
system,
So-
yeah.
Right,
So-
just soil testing.
Yeah, because I mean, we need to know the bedrooms and the size and all that to approve the design, so.
And you won't know where the house can go until you know where the septic needs to go.
Exactly, yeah.
So-
Exactly, okay, I just wanna make sure I'm
Yeah.
doing.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, actually, the way you're
Yeah.
progressing.
So is this,
The other issue too is if there is some foresight on where the house is going, you'll need to determine groundwater at that location as well.
Yeah,
So
there,
if,
there was a preliminary plan done by the previous surveyor,
So-
which sort of had the 50 by 100 blocks
Yeah.
that the house could possibly fit with all of the, distance requirements.
I see, so,
Septic and septic.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if they didn't,
I don't believe.
they
what I
probably
understand-
didn't realize where they were putting the house back when we were testing, so that would have to also be explored for groundwater where the house is being located. And you can't have groundwater within 2 feet of the foundation,
Okay.
the bottom of
the bottom of the foundation, yes, good point.
Any other, the other specific question is about Washington's existing well.
Yes, that, okay.
That's-
So just a
Well, I'm
question.
just curious about a comment that Ellen made. She said, well, they could just make a new application and pay a new fee, but if they would continue this application, there wouldn't be a new fee, right?
But
They've
They're
already
not.
done the
People.
testing.
The-
That testing's already been conducted.
Yeah,
Oh, so you're talking about,
Completed,
so
yeah.
it is a new round of, oh,
Yeah,
I just-
essentially.
new
Yeah.
owners,
This wasn't all
yeah.
a new round of testing.
Correct.
I didn't understand it.
You-
How long, I think it was, what, a few years?
yeah, it was
15,
different owners back
2015.
then. Who, do you own it right now, does someone else own it?
Sarah,
Okay, and then you would have to sign an agreement or, as the owner of the property, okay. Good.
Okay, all right. And then the other question, maybe you could point out, because I couldn't
yeah, it's actually.
figure out from the very small
It's-
things exactly where everything was, and I'll tell you so part of this has to do with the driveway
Oh,
and
yeah.
how close it comes to the
It's right
well,
here.
because we require protection of the wellhead, but it's unclear whether it's someone else's well. Is it the well for your property,
It's
or?
It's the well for her property.
Yes.
And, okay,
But
your
the-
property being the property that we're
In
talking about.
Washington, yes.
Okay, so maybe you could show
Sure,
where it
so-
is and where the
So
boundaries
this is the
are.
lot lines for 8 Washington.
Okay,
And this is the old farm road, which I would propose to reuse as the driveway. And this is the well. And the distance from the stone wall where the easement begins to the well is 20 feet.
But that well services this house?
Correct.
I believe so.
So it's
And-
beyond the stone wall, okay.
wait, so
So the stone
you're
wall
going to
sort of
act,
stops.
this is the property that you would eventually be on?
That's
Is-
correct.
And, okay, and that's being split off from this property, is that?
Correct.
Okay,
And you
and you're going to have some road access through part of this property?
That's
to
right.
get
This-
to the
this
back of yours?
section right here, there's an
Okay.
easement.
So, I'll just say my feeling is, putting someone else's well in jeopardy, plows, whatever, even though we require some protection of it for when it's that close to a driveway or a road, is not the same as having your own well be at risk from traffic to and from your house. And I also don't know I'm not inclined to think that's a good thing I mean, you may agree now, but whoever comes next may not expect that. They have a well at risk where someone may drive on your property, hit it, never say anything, but it could compromise the well.
Road
and then it's-
salt and all
It's
that,
not
yeah.
tied to the property owner or the folks who have affected it. So I just view it differently when it's affecting
A different.
your
person's
own well.
Right.
Which is
Um,
why I wanted to come before you
Yeah.
next.
Right,
as
so-
we're trying to figure out how to make this all work.
Right, so either that well moves
Right.
or the
That's what I was gonna
driveway
say is an
moves would
option.
be, to me, a more robust solution. Just because, you may agree and have a different relationship than whoever comes down the line in the future. And it just seems like a risky thing to set up.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about the possibility of moving the well, which,
Or the driveway.
or the driveway, yes, although, I think to a large extent, it's whichever is more, cost efficient,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
And I don't know if
Where's
it's
your
going to
septic
be
now?
it
No.
might be a Concom issue too, in terms of
Moving the
where
road.
you can move the driveway.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I think moving
It'll
the
be
driveway may be
challenging.
more problematic because of
Yeah.
the wetlands. Which is interesting also, I have an aerial from the fifties. And it appears that there is a drainage, because this is a substantial drainage culvert. It appears that there was a culvert that's now filled in, which is actually making this more and more wet.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was clearly a, this
Was it a swale or an actual
it was
culvert?
an actual, like, drainage ditch.
Okay.
This was in the fifties, pasture land,
Mm-hmm.
clear. And you can see a clear drainage ditch, and now it's sort of swampy, but you can see the remnants of where that ditch was, just from a wetlands perspective. I don't know, I would even want to attempt to try to excavate that or do anything, but that's just, I think that's.
Well, and
the
that would be
situation.
up to Concom
Yeah.
whether one could even do that at this point.
Yeah,
now that
it seems
it's-
like there's a
naturalized.
culvert coming out of the road, draining right into the property, so it may, it sort of validates that there was some sort of channel at some point, but.
All right, so this is, it was sad. I was coming home from work late at night and saw something large in the road, and it was an otter.
Really?
Otter.
Unfortunately dead, huge.
Well, because
Here,
across the
so
street
you
though,
may
there's
see
a
some
lot, there's
interesting
like a
animals.
swamp.
We
So
do.
hopefully live.
Well, and
Yeah.
so I guess back to the well
So-
issue. So the conservation, so the Board of Health would be not inclined to, or I guess when I was filing a building application, you would be inclined to prevent me using the driveway with the well as it currently is.
That close. Again, our requirement right now is that when there's a roadway close to the well, we want some bollards or wall or something to protect it. But again, the maintenance of that, something goes awry, the
Okay.
thing that's gonna be damaged by
Okay.
whoever's
And
coming to visit you or
so-
whatever
but
is
the
gonna be
wall-
somebody else, so.
So the wall there doesn't,
But the wall's on the
So,
other side
okay.
of the well, isn't it? Didn't you say the
is it
well?
on the other side?
That's what
Yeah.
he just said,
Okay.
so,
Yeah, yeah.
actually,
Wall.
so, yeah.
Right.
And then there's the road, and then the
Yeah.
well's just off.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
yeah, it's not gonna
Um,
do anything.
So then in terms of the building application, having some agreement from us that we will, move the well though, is that
Well,
sufficient then?
if I
Well,
may,
we'd have
we're
to be
getting
moved first,
two
but-
steps ahead. We don't get to the building application till the septic plan with the driveway shown and the well locations or location gets approved both by Conservation and the Board of Health. So previously, the driveway near wetlands was discussed right a few minutes ago. So we're really not jumping up to the building application until you get through the septic plan well
I know
approval.
that this is one of the last steps, but the last thing I wanted to do is be at the last step.
Exactly, yeah.
Under- Understandable.
So
Understandable.
eventually, what we have to have is a plan that shows the whole property and it shows everything that's gonna be there, because then Mark is going to review it and measure and make sure everything has
Right.
the appropriate setbacks from whatever it needs to be. So it's good to think ahead, because you will face that,
Right.
sort of soon,
Okay.
in getting all the pieces to fit in the space you have, and with the constraints of wetlands and what's appropriate for the septic, and
Right.
you need a well.
Right.
So, it's a puzzle.
It is a puzzle.
But,
Yeah, and obviously, we don't wanna move with the well until we know that everything,
Yeah,
right.
right.
yeah.
And, Mark can certainly help you as you go through this, so. And there's even the, what do we call that, consultation, kind of pre-planning sort of
Sure. That-
consultation.
That's what
that
this is.
work
was
through the
submitted.
options and.
Yeah.
So, I think Sarah's point, or Sarah's question earlier was, could we get a contingent approval?
For what?
So if we went
Building?
through, if I went through the full process, and the last piece was the location of the well, could we get a contingent approval for me on a fill building permit if she moved the well?
Like a condition?
I don't,
It would
we
need to be
wouldn't issue the
tested.
permit until you could actually relocate.
Well,
You
would
would,
we
we
be
could give you
able-
an indication that
Right, that
everything
it-
was in line
Yeah,
if
yeah,
it
yeah,
moved
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
outside
Well,
this,
I think that's
but we
fine,
couldn't
that's
give
fine.
you a
Well, no,
permit
I just
until
want
it
to, I
happened.
think she wants assurances that they're not gonna spend money and then they can't
Right.
sell the land because.
Yeah,
see.
yeah, so I think we would move the well once we were told everything's in line except for this. Once you do this, you're good
Right.
to go.
But
But
we
the-
couldn't approve
Yeah,
officially
yeah,
the
yeah.
permits.
No,
Yeah.
that makes
Yeah.
complete sense.
Understood.
I think you'll want to talk to someone about how a well fits now, because once you move that, you need to have the setbacks from your septic
Septic,
and anybody neighboring
abutter septic.
septics, and so you're gonna have the same kind of puzzle of, there's an arc here and an arc here and something else, and, you can fit it in this
There'll be a
area,
sweet spot
so,
though, somewhere.
And then you'll have to drill it and prove that the quality and quantity is
Yeah.
sufficient to supply your house. So there is, even if we say, if it moves away,
Right.
you
There
can
may-
do it, there's still the uncertainty of
Right, right.
you drill
Yeah,
and-
no, so it certainly makes sense for us to
So-
do all that legwork in advance.
so,
Yes, but before we drill into the new ground.
yeah.
Right.
Problem is if the septic system area doesn't pass, or they're well, we jump the gun again. Again, we gotta get through step 1 and
Oh,
2
yeah.
first. Finalizing soil testing, making sure it meets our code, designing a septic plan or septic plans with wells, making sure they meet our codes and conservation through both steps. Then I think you would be able to address the other issues. But to get there, you are expending a lot of resources. What I would suggest is you talk to a consultant on both the well change on 8 Washington as well as you and I will be working with the engineer, but to answer it at this point would be premature in my view.
Oh, no, I agree.
Yeah, I was just trying to get a litmus of
Yeah.
your opinion on the matter, so we know sort of.
No, as you go through stepwise, when you do that soil testing, you'll have a lot of information at that point, because the septic is, I would say, the harder thing,
Yeah.
if anything, to cite, so.
And you'll have to test for the house location too for groundwater, so.
Okay.
And conservation will have obviously a review on this based on the wetlands.
Because you have a reasonable number of acres.
How big is that parcel, the one that you're?
7.34.
It was, this is what, 5 and, the previous parcels as they were laid out was like 5 and 4.
Oh,
And then it
I
was
see.
combined and Okay.
So is the general idea that this area looks like, is this all too wet? And that would be
This
the
did
septic
not
and
pass at all,
house
yeah.
likely up
Right.
there?
This is
Okay.
promising.
Yeah.
From
Well,
our
closer
point
to
of view,
the
It's kind of
road,
nice
the-
when we
the
look
higher
at the back of our
topography.
house, we
Yeah.
just see a nice
The same,
driveway.
yep.
Yeah, we're pretty much the same, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, that was one of the really important things to us selling this land, that, our property stays pretty much exactly the same.
Mhm.
That was one of the appealing things about Zach buying it. He certainly seemed committed to that, so,
Willing to venture into the backwoods,
yes,
Yes.
and doing everything correctly.
so.
All right, well, thank you very
Okay.
much.
Sure.
So you prefer if I file a new application?
You would have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
It
it's
really
just-
is, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. And then I can carry the data that existed,
Yeah,
I guess to the extent that it's valuable, will be carried forward.
except for the groundwater adjustment, I still want to talk to the engineer about
Yeah, I'm not clear exactly on
how we determine the well, comparison well.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
All right, well, good luck, and we'll see you again.
Yeah, I'm sure many times. Thank you.
Right across the street from me.
Well, that's true. Easy. Okay. All right. All right, which? How about we'll do another little general chemical update. We just had a discussion earlier with Mary Ann Muncher, who was here early because she was curious to hear that. So we spoke before the meeting started, but it was just informal. So, but now we'll discuss that, and part of the issue is,
I'm sorry, I would have tried to come, or, I mean, I would have been interested to hear you.
Oh,
No, we're
no,
gonna
we're gonna
talk
do it
about
now.
Oh, good, now you're just repeating it for me? Thank you.
so,
For the
and
meeting.
everybody else.
Yeah,
So,
great, wonderful.
But
Thank
it
you.
allowed Mary Ann to go home.
Excellent.
So, this is the wrong document.
Should we-
So the issue is we have, DEP is moving ahead with the next stages of addressing the contamination problems of General Chemical with the funds that they have available. And TRC and Ethan Mascoot, our health agent, were advising us informally that now would be the time for the town to, again, state some of its concerns and relay those to Mass DEP and to help guide their next steps on project development. However, Lisa can share her thoughts because she is involved with the kinds of processes involved with this all the time, even though DEP is now the one executing it, which is a little different
It is
than usual. So,
Yeah, so what was provided by DEP and uploaded on their site, so it's public information, is an assessment of the, it's sort of a focus remedy evaluation. And as we've discussed in the past, what's being proposed by DEP with the amount of money that's available is to do a source area remedy using thermal treatment. And, but this document is really sort of, it kind of goes over conceptually what's being proposed. They did send it out to EPA again, and EPA provided a few, I think, really good comments on it. But DEP has made it clear that this is not a public review document. So they are not receiving comments on it because it's not a phase report. This is an informal sort of interim step that was taken. So the next thing that is going to be up for public comment, which is the next part in the regulatory process, is basically a detailed plan of exactly what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, all their treatment goals, what's their monitoring program, all the specifics of the treatment. That is going to be put out for public comment, and there will be a public meeting on it as well, where people can articulate concerns and ask questions. So,
Does that need to confine to that, to $10,000?
well, we haven't even gotten to that yet, so, no, you mean the report?
That's independent of the money that was put aside. That's
For
just,
review?
that's just gonna be incorporated into the DEP's general responsibility.
Oh, I mean, so
It's
there's like $2
independent of the
million.
financials. Okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah, not 10,000, I was like, wait, no.
What was that? I thought I read it was 10,000.
No, that's for, that might be a TAG grant, which is a public,
Oh,
so
okay.
if you're like Framingham or something, they can get technical assistant grants to have a consultant review reports.
okay.
That might be $10,000.
Thank you,
And
sorry.
what we might end up giving to TRC might be on the order of $5,000 to $10,000 to provide technical comments. But my feeling is that since DEP is not going to be officially receiving comments on this interim document, that we save our money and use it instead to have Drew assist us in reviewing this detailed plan that they will be entertaining comments on. And I think, you know, the biggest point two takeaways I get from this interim document are things that we've discussed many times with DEP and with Framingham. And that is, one, that the area that they're proposing for cleanup is the most contaminated, but there's also a contaminated area immediately up gradient. And so a concern that we articulated was, well, if you clean it up here, but there's still contamination immediately up gradient, isn't gonna
gonna
get
recontaminate,
recontaminated.
right.
And then they had also proposed to use several $100,000 for bioaugmentation, in other words, to keep the natural biodegradation moving along at a quicker pace. But it is already occurring. So what EPA's two comments are, why don't you take that money you were gonna use for the bioaugmentation and instead just expand the thermal treatment to that upgrading area? We have said that before. They're saying it again in this, you know, public,
Forum.
document. And I'm hopeful that, Aptima and DP are going to modify the plan to reflect that. And if they don't, we're gonna just push them on it again. But I would be sort of surprised if, you know, they've heard it several times in several different forums. So I'm hopeful that we're gonna see that in the detailed plan. But it just seems like DP is not gonna be entertaining our thoughts and
Right, so
receiving
why-
it. So
so you might as
I'm
well
not sure
just
that's a
wait
good use of
at
our
this
money.
Right, and I think that Ethan and Drew's thoughts were, just to reiterate concerns that we've expressed already, but if they're so focused, sounds like the process is that they're very focused on just trying to write out a plan, that, are they going to hear it any differently than they
Is there
have or have
anyone-
not
are
heard
you
our
aware
concerns in the
of-
past?
Are you aware, I don't know how involved Ethan is at this point, is he involved, other than representing us? Is he involved? Because I know
He was
has
at the last meeting, both.
Oh, I know,
both
but
of us.
I know that right now, his responsibility is to us, but in the past,
Yes.
he's been involved. Was that in a different context?
When he worked for the town of Framingham.
Right, so is he still involved in that capacity? Okay, so my question is, are you or are we aware of anyone else who, although they might be representing Framingham, but whose interests are in line with those that we
Oh, yeah, no.
share? So we're not missing an opportunity, and they're gonna do it anyway, is what I'm saying,
No, we've
so.
been communicating a
Yeah.
lot with
Carol.
Framingham.
Yeah, so
and
we've
we've
so
gone to meetings,
The
but
good news is our interests are being represented in another context.
No, no,
we
no.
have
Not at
different,
all.
well,
Yep.
we have different interests than Framingham. Framingham isn't drinking the groundwater.
We have
Right.
overlap, though.
We're the
Right.
ones. There's some,
So,
Yeah.
and we've coordinated a lot, but it is a different level of
Yeah.
interest, and even Natick potentially has it, because they're also down
Right.
gradient from
My
this,
point
and
is
they
that-
have wells that are
right, so my point
roughly
is that
down
although we
gradient,
have
so-
maybe a expanded, more intense interest because we drank the groundwater, if we can accomplish the same goal, then we're not missing an opportunity that we need to take. So it's good, especially if there are other people who are trying to achieve the same goal. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, except,
So-
I mean, we're
Right, to
gonna
some
still
degree.
comment
Right, but
on
we're
this
just
next
waiting,
document.
we're just waiting until the better time to comment.
Well, actually, the only time.
Okay.
Really,
Right, right.
that we're gonna have the
Yeah.
public forum in which to comment, get our comments on record. And that's where I think Drew can really add value, and by, you know, they're just not covering any new ground really
Right,
in
right,
this.
right,
I mean,
right.
these are all things that have been discussed before. It's really an affirmation that
Right,
they're
right.
picked the right technology. And now the devil's gonna be in the details, like, okay, exactly what is the treatment area? Well, I think
Right.
we, Framingham and EPA have all said you should include that additional upgrading area in the treatment area for the thermal, because we think it would do a really good job.
Also,
Oh, sorry.
I'm a little unclear why they would divert funds for the biodegradation when it's thermal destruction, which then gets rid of it. And I have to say, I haven't tried to figure out what the details are of the process steps, but again, you don't always get a benign or less toxic byproduct from biodegradation, so that's a whole pathway and.
Except
progression,
eventually it goes
so-
to
But is the
ethene, so, and it
product
does, I mean,
after-
you want.
Eventually, but
No, it's a
it's
good
still-
thing.
Is the
always
product of the
though?
thermal
You
regulation?
wanna have I mean, first of all, you're still removing mass. It's all about like the molar fractions and stuff. So what happens is, as it dechlorinates, it'll go from, PCE to TCE to the DCE and then vinyl chloride, and then to the ethenes and the ethanes, which are completely non-toxic.
But the
So-
toxicity at some point goes up.
Well, actually, for
For some of the
I mean,
items,
the
so-
only thing that's possibly more toxic than TCE is vinyl
vinyl
chloride.
chloride.
But you know what? I actually don't know that that's true anymore, just based on all the most
you
recent,
know-
it's pretty comparable.
Do you
to be
know
honest.
if the thermal degraded effluent, whatever we're gonna produce through that thermal degradation, is that more susceptible to degradation?
Well,
That would
so
be
the lower the concentrations are to typically, like the bugs can sort of keep pace better. So when it's these giant ppm concentrations, it's happening, but it's not happening
Right, it's
at
too much.
that great a pace. So when you destroy a bunch of mass and you're just reducing the mass and reducing the
It's-
concentrations, it's gonna be enhanced
It's
anyway.
gonna be more effective.
So all EPA is saying, this is gonna happen anyway. It might happen a little bit slower, but it's gonna happen. Why not just, if we really
Keep
wanna get the
going on
bang
the-
for the
yes.
buck,
Yeah.
we don't want what you just cleaned up to get recontaminated.
Right,
So
that's
why
smart.
is
So-
DEP even contemplating that?
I think that they were, I don't know if, because I wasn't as
Yeah.
involved initially, so I don't know. They definitely went to the biggest, worst source area. That is a fact. The primary target is the right primary target. It's all about the boundaries, so should they include this additional thing as well, like MW 110? I think it would be a good thing. So we're not talking about a whole different paradigm shift. We're talking about basically extending in one direction the treatment area, and then to afford that, maybe either tamping down or eliminating the bioaggregation.
Are they fearful that there just isn't enough to expand into that other area and therefore take this cheaper approach that slowly
Unclear.
and less effectively might?
Unclear.
So, can I ask a really basic question, like, are there certain plant species or like naturally
Oh, no,
occurring
it's- we're talking
substances that
bugs,
are
bacteria.
involved with, right, I know, but to enhance the biodegradation process later?
No, this is
there
deep in the
anything-
ground. This is
Right,
deep.
but is there anything that can be done by us exogenously?
Oh, yeah, that's what the polishing step is, but it's injections with nutrient and bugs to
Okay,
get the
oh,
bugs
that's cool.
going.
All right, so that's why I was saying, it's a totally basic question, because I wasn't positive
Yeah.
on the biodegradation.
Yeah, that's all that
I
means.
understand what it is, but I wasn't sure how you accomplish it. Okay.
Right, so, and it's complicated because there's the chlorinateds, which are the focus, the chlorinated compounds, but there's also petroleum contamination, and that upgrading area has sort of a mixture of both, and so there's co-solubilization, and there's different, redox environments, so too complicated to get into right now, but I thought EPA's comments were on point.
Yeah.
They were very consistent with things that Drew, Carol, many people have articulated in the past. We talked about this particular thing at the meeting I was at with Drew and Framingham, and so I'm hopeful that it will make a difference.
Yeah, I gather
That's good.
EPA has been pretty important to moving this along. And
So,
somehow, long ago, Framingham got EPA involved because they hadn't been involved.
Well, they
and
tried
were
to
the
make it a
ones
Superfund site,
advocating-
but it didn't.
what are the, how would it be determined a Superfund site? Like, what would be
It's a
required?
whole scoring
A
process.
threshold
Yeah, it didn't
threshold.
pass this.
that is
Because
defined
where
by
the
some
actual
person.
site is, they bought a lot of the properties that were contaminated already.
Mhm.
They bought a lot of the homes in the immediate area, and
And they
it's
haven't
not a-
tied it to our drinking water.
yeah, it's not, so they're not considering it having impacted
Yeah.
an active current drinking water supply. And the homes that had the bad vapor intrusion got bought. So in terms of immediate exposure pathways, yes, there's a lot of mass there. Yes, there's the emergency whole aqueduct thing, but it just didn't score high enough when you look at the hazard ranking. There's sites where there's drums spilling liquid on the ground with kids living right next door. Those kind of
Yeah.
exposure scenarios are gonna score a lot higher
Right.
than this, so. And also, there was a viable party at the time that it was considered, too. Like, this is pre-bankruptcy.
Oh, I thought it was post.
No, I thought the scoring was done, I thought it was,
No, I'm pretty sure it was
well, or
after.
maybe it was
because
right
it
on the,
was
maybe it was
pre.
right
I thought it
after.
was
At the
great.
first meetings, after General Chemical declared bankruptcy, so there were meetings with Natick, Sherborn, Framingham, state representatives, whoever could come and who had an interest, and with the DEP. And they were talking about bringing it to the Superfund program at that time, so I think it did come afterwards.
Okay.
But you
But
pointed
if
out in the
the-
past that you think that's probably a good thing, because
I
it'll
do.
move faster
It's
outside of the
absolutely,
Superfund program.
there's no question in my mind, it's
So.
much better to have it continue to be under the Massachusetts contingency plan. Just having worked in both regulatory arenas, many, many, many times,
Really?
there's no comparison, no comparison, so.
So, okay, so,
Great, you had that experience.
so do we have a motion? We need to, how are we gonna
To the
phrase
vote
this?
on the
I move
proposal?
that we save
Yes.
our money
That's
at this
Right.
time in the process.
But, hold on.
But that doesn't mean when it comes down to the public review
Yeah,
document, that he
no.
can't look at this as well. I mean, he can, you know, this
Who-
isn't
who's
that long a
he?
document. Drew.
Oh,
This isn't a long
here it is.
document, so.
Okay,
well, that's why, that's kind of what I was saying. I mean, we have, obviously, we have drinking water, but the reality is everyone's sharing the same interest. And so there are going to be some people representing our interests, even though it's indirect.
No, we still need to have our interests represented, though.
But at this point, we're not
No
going to
one's-
accomplish anything. We have to
No.
wait till we have public comment.
Right, this is not the
Yeah.
report that we're able to provide that input on.
okay.
We're not missing an opportunity because we don't have an opportunity.
Exactly.
Is what I'm saying, so.
Yes, okay.
And what about Ethan, if so he's not involved anymore, outside of our association, so
Correct.
he won't be consulted probably further at this time.
All right, I'm trying to decide how to phrase the motion. Because we could just vote not to authorize the monies at this point.
What about to wait
But-
until
To
we
Right, I'd
postpone,
rather-
basically,
I'd
to
rather just
postpone
postpone
authorization
Until.
until the public comment report is available for review and comment.
And then at that time,
Well,
ask for
how does
a
this change-
revised
But how does this change
proposal.
what we were doing? Because we wouldn't,
They gave us a proposal to review and comment on this document. And then DEP made it quite clear that they were not going to be accepting comments on this document. So I think basically what happened is that their proposal predated sort of the feedback from DEP that said,
does it
We're-
make a difference though if we do the work now or if we do the
yeah,
work in
because
a
this
month?
isn't the same report.
Right, we have a new report, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just
That
said
makes a
that.
big
Okay, great, yeah.
Yeah,
So we
you
just
know, it may
wait
not be
until
a
we have the
big
final
revision.
document available to expend our
right,
available funds.
okay, so back to,
Updated information, the most updated information is available prior to initiation of our review.
right, but let's, so the board, do we have a motion to postpone?
Or defer.
I would just say,
Postpone technical support
Yep.
from TRC until there's a more detailed plan available from,
from DEP,
DEP.
and at that time, request just a revision to the current proposal to address review of that detailed plan.
Or why don't we put it in the affirmative so that, and just say authorize review funds once a final document is available for review?
Because they're gonna have to revise this proposal. This proposal is about the wrong report right now.
No, I understand that, but we have to say that we're not gonna do this document.
Yes.
by postponing
Or
it.
postpone authorization of funds.
And then when that comes in, then we can review it, vote on it. If we decide that we'd like to request the funds from
Town administrator.
reserve transfer, I believe it would be.
Mhm.
And then we need to go to the selectmen and ask and say, hey, we all voted for it, now we need your
Okay.
support or whatever for that. So, okay, so that's the motion. Did you get, is there anything we're missing?
I don't think so.
Okay, great. So, that's the motion. Anyone like to move?
I would second, oh, go ahead.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Okay.
Okay. And can you send oh wait, what's today? It's Wednesday. Can you send an email to David, just letting him know that?
Yes, yeah.
And I guess copy Ethan and TRC that we'd like to get back to them, but, and if they have questions, they can call us or something. Okay, let's see. All right, I just want to ask, oh, Mark, let's actually do all of your stuff, so if you would like.
Agent's business.
Although we might want you around for everything, we're just asking, but,
What's this? 59 Prospect. Did we talk about that, or?
Not yet,
Okay.
And they are all set with conservation?
yes.
Okay, good. Do you want to do that one first, so I don't?
Yeah.
That first, it's highest up on the agenda.
The smallest plan, too. It's a building application that we received a couple months ago, maybe a month ago, but it might have been two. And with the building application was for an addition to the home. And the addition was going to be too close to the existing, the plan, to the existing septic tank. And this is the house, this is the addition. It's part of the garage. The existing septic tank is right here, so it was definitely too close. And he knew about it, he kind of knew when we talked. They're proposing a new septic tank, 2-compartment, 12 feet out from the garage, 14 feet out from garage/addition, 14 feet out from the existing house. And then it will connect at this joint and reconnect at this point here to the existing septic system that's out here. I recommend approval based on the plan design from Jalen Engineering.
okay, any, I'm just curious, is there any upgrade going on with the tank at this same time?
Well, it's a whole new septic tank. That one will be abandoned, so instead of single compartment, it'll be
Oh,
two.
it is going to double, great, great.
What is able for the two?
Mhm.
And what is the addition? I forgot. Is it?
I can go get it. It's a garage/mudroom, and I think he's doing some work in room addition to a room. Everything met the building proposal except for the distance to the tank.
Good.
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the plan as presented?
So moved?
Second.
And actually, before we've gone, any,
Pre-construction. is what
just
I would say, yeah.
pre-construction? Okay, so conditional to pre-construction.
Well, that doesn't go with the plan approval, though, that's the installer.
Oh, all
That's the
right.
installer.
So we will not
Okay.
add that to it.
Yeah.
Helen must correct me. Try to get it in.
Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
But that's the way we do it, that is correct.
Okay.
I just mentioned light discussion.
Okay,
Okay.
and,
Next one is going to be 21 Green Lane. It's a revision to a previously approved plan. He probably had his other plan out just in case, but we haven't heard anything on 11, have we, Ellen?
I heard that Conservation did approve it at their last meeting, but they're waiting to give me the approval because they're waiting for a plan from Ben.
Okay, so
So,
with
and
that
when they
said,
get a
I'll-
further
that-
plan, then they'll give me their approval, and then
Just take
the
that out.
next plan can get
Okay, so
approved.
that's why you don't see it on the agenda.
That's
Just in
11.
case, I had it ready, and that's why it was with the other plan, but they're not ready with the Conservation Commission. This plan you've seen before. It was approved to help out. Let me just show that it's, you're going up Green Lane this way, the lots go down to Maple Street. The house numbers go up Green Lane. This is the second lot from the furthest house.
So it's lot 2?
Lot 2, 21 Green Lane. What they're doing basically is increasing the bedroom count from 4 to 6. They're planning a 5-bedroom house, but they're planning possibly up to 12 to 13 rooms. He's saying that his applicants are asking for rooms, so he has to make these changes. So he added an additional leaching line and increased the size of the septic tank to a 2,000 gallon. And
Okay, and it,
he made it work, and there was plenty of testing in the area. The original system, I can show you the plan, was just these 2 lines, and we had the testing over here too, so
okay.
it does fit, and it fits all the property line distances.
Setbacks.
People want big homes, or lots of rooms, I guess.
Mm.
And
Way
is
to
there
go.
an issue of no garbage grinder or anything else?
This one will have to be approved with no garbage.
Okay. And that would be the only thing I would imagine, so. Okay, do we have a motion to approve the revised plan as submitted, conditional to receipt of a deed restriction for garbage grinder?
I think he's already done,
Oh,
So he has
yeah.
it from before.
from the, yeah.
Is that? can you
Yeah,
just-
that just carries, it's
Oh,
on the
okay.
property. It's on the property, it's
Right.
not on the plan.
okay,
Good.
all right, and strike that last bit. And we'd like to move the motion?
So moved?
This is the
Second.
pre-existing house being increased. Yeah.
No, it's gonna be a new house.
Right, but
Oh,
the pre-existing
already, yeah.
plan just being increased in size. So, second.
Okay, any other questions, comments?
They're not having to remove any more ledge or anything to do this
Well, they shouldn't have any
extension.
ledge in either
Okay.
area, and the tank size isn't much bigger.
Yeah.
They go with depth and width and length, that's the.
Just asking.
Yeah, no, there better not be any ledge there, they tested, they did a
Okay.
deep hole right there. No more, if there's any rock crushing on all these lots, the ledge is pretty much right in here,
Yeah,
so that's why.
might come with
Kind of
that
in the
new lot 3A
Yeah,
or
it will,
whatever.
it will. There was a need to level the hill going over. And
Can you please say that again? What will? What?
there was a need to level the ledge that was in the front part of these lots, especially at the lower side.
You're talking
Maple
about
Street.
previous work that's been
They've
done.
already done the previous work, that's correct. These lots, there's some ledge up front, but not like the ones closer to Maple Street.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
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 I saw this, and I was like, ooh.
And now, Ellen, if I can ask one more question, 40 Maple Street, were they able to, they were going to try to get on tonight's agenda, but
They are not.
that was, they're not.
I don't know anything about,
It was the preliminary building application.
that would be you putting it on the agenda.
Yeah, it just came in yesterday. I did review it, but there was something else they were
It hasn't
waiting
been
on.
added to the agenda.
Did they pay the fee? That's what it was, fee and application. I'm
It
sorry,
would
catching
be
you off
in
guard.
the
I don't mean to
office.
do
I
that.
don't-
That would be in the category of not being emergent.
Yeah.
It's not emergent, or,
Mhm.
it's not urgent, no. Everyone's in
Next
a
time.
rush. Everyone's in a rush. I'll make sure it's on it's gonna require some discussion too. So with that said,
Is it a
16.
new property or?
No, 40 Maple Street was originally a three-bedroom home that was demo
I
reconstruct.
don't think you should be talking
Oh,
about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so that's what it'll be when I discuss it next time.
Okay. No, I was just curious
Yeah,
if it
no,
was
no.
new or not new.
It's, that's what it is.
Okay.
And I won't say anything more. Good point, Ellen. And the last one is, the board had allowed me to sign 16 Nason Hill Lane. It is ready for approval. Since it was so close to the meeting, the decision was made to bring it to the board for final stamping. It's the other septic plan, not for the pool house, which that pipe has been completed. This is for the septic tank and new associated piping to the barn for the addition. For the- so,
Okay.
do you want to see it?
Yeah, just quickly.
I'm sorry, I'm just amused by the tagline quickly.
We spent a lot
To
of time,
refresh-
we've spent a lot of time.
I
with
know.
Just because we might see it again and I
I'm very
can't
familiar
remember
with the
anymore.
tagline.
I was just gonna say, I remember that being said
Yeah,
by
it's said a
someone
lot,
on the
it's been
board.
said a lot.
Let's keep saying it.
Okay, so this is it. This is the existing dwelling. This is the existing tennis court and pool area that was worked on a previous plan by a different engineer, where they brought this force main up to the existing septic tank up here. They went around the pool. That's been done. This is the other part. Here's the new barn being proposed. This is the existing barn. We're proposing a riding rink, apartment up above.
Holy moly.
Yeah,
That's big.
so here's the septic tank being proposed, and they'll be drawn down to a manhole cover and change an angle down to a distribution box with the septic tank, obviously allowing for the settling of the solids before it goes into the distribution box, just like it, they're not tying into this tank, they don't need to, because they're putting the septic tank up above. This tank wouldn't be sufficient, so that's why it's built the way it is. Recommend approval. This was done by J.D. Marquardt and Associates.
I don't know that.
It's been a while, but two compartment,
Mhm.
1,500. And this approval will get him started on the building application, which he's been anxiously waiting.
Mhm.
As we know.
Okay,
I missed some of the fun meetings.
Oh, yeah.
all right. Do we need any conditions on this
Um,
of any sort? Okay, so do we have a motion
well,
to,
you know, just see.
maybe?
It was, see, I gotta go back in history, but
Mm.
the original system was reviewed and approved for the use, but I believe it was, I can't remember if we required no deed recording. This is a connection from the barn, and that, I'd have to look at the minutes. So there may be a condition, let's see, it's loaded, because this is going for a whole year. I can't remember if that was, the tank's big enough for a garbage disposal, so, but I can look into that and note that condition. But,
As necessary.
we can't change what the existing house has, but I believe the reason they got the additional flow was because they didn't have a garbage ground. I'd have to go back to the minutes
Yeah.
to
Mm.
find
So
out.
can we even vote on this
Yeah,
now
you can
then?
vote on this, because it's just the septic tank going to the system. You already voted on the size of that system
Oh, all right,
for the barn.
okay.
That was already approved. a
All
long
right, so
time. I'm just trying to
then
remember,
there would
was
be
it-
if there was a condition needed, it's already,
it's already
Yeah,
approved,
okay,
because
all
you
right.
approved that
Okay.
addition, additional to the septic
Yeah.
tank. But I believe it was part of that, but it goes back almost
Mm.
a year. It was around Valentine's Day onward, that we, because I went to their house on Valentine's Day, I'll never forget it. So that's all been resolved
Right.
as of May, conditional to this approval.
right, May last year, right,
But this was pending until they fixed the pool house,
Yeah.
so it was like different,
domino
different progression,
effect.
different way of doing things, but
Okay,
I recommend approval.
all right, so do we have a motion to approve the plan as presented?
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, I should bring the minutes with me, just easy to, but I wouldn't be able to be quick if I did that.
Okay, since Artis is here, we have 59 North Main, we had a meeting with them, but we'll go to the discussion of significant site work, including ledge removal. So, we've been talking about this for a few months, trying to figure out what we're doing, and what we're really looking towards now is how can we set up regulations that could be a mixture, either protect or alert residents to when there is some sort of ledge disruption activity that may impact the quality of their drinking water, because there's growing information that says that when soils are disturbed and/or ledge is broken up, blasted, hammered, any variety of mechanisms, that can lead to increased leaching of various mineral constituents. And the one that we're concerned about right now is manganese, because although it's an important nutrient for us, in excess, it's toxic and causes a number of problems, including certainly for fetuses. It's a big problem, can lead to heart defects.
But the most serious thing is the progressive neurologic deterioration in Parkinsonian.
So
There's
manganism.
neurotoxicity associated with progressive neurologic deterioration that's irreversible because it deposits in the liver and then it gets released over time. Manganese.
Manganese, yeah.
Yep. Yes, so in any case, state of Connecticut has noticed that. I've seen that North Carolina is discussing the topic more and more.
New Hampshire.
So, as we progress through this in town, we've been doing research, and then Lisa and I agreed a couple meetings ago, that we were going to take stabs at regulatory language that we might consider, and how would we weave that in. So we've taken different tactics so that we can at least look at kind of two ends of the spectrum, really doing this. And I'll say, so I looked at something that really said before ledge disruption could be done on a property, that there would need to be notification of residents, property owners within a certain radius around the project. And the point of that would be so that those folks could have their water analyzed and establish a baseline of water quality conditions before someone moved ahead with that activity. And then I also had just that, in terms of blasting, that perchlorate-free blasting agents should be used, because that's yet another contaminant that could be introduced. But the manganese problem arises in the absence of the blasting agent. And then Lisa can explain, she took a tack more on, I would say, more responsibility on the
Applicant.
project proponent for the ledge removal activity, so.
Yeah, so what some municipalities and states are doing is, if there's going to be a certain volume of ledge or rock that's going to be blasted or removed, that they require a permit type thing or a blasting plan. I was, and we're still discussing, like, what would be an appropriate, first of all, cutoff, Obviously, if someone's removing a small boulder, at the edge of their driveway, it's a completely different scenario. So there should be a threshold, I think, because that's reasonable. And that really the plan, the goal would be, like Darrell was saying, minimize the potential for adverse impacts to potable water quality, provide, I was weaving it into sort of this permit or something, that the applicant actually would be responsible for doing baseline testing of abutters, and that if the project was going to last longer than 2 weeks, that every 2 weeks monitoring be done throughout the project, because right now we don't maybe have things that are going to last like months and months, but who knows in the future, and at the cessation of the project, that post-completion samples also be collected, and focusing on the metals, as well as maybe a subset of VOCs, because sometimes the fuel that is actually used in the blasting can have benzene and, it's almost like gasoline type fuel. So, and then coliform bacteria. And like Daryl said, it's not only that it could be enhancing the leaching of these things, but it's also that it's basically breaking up rock that has all these metals and minerals in it, and it's dislodging it, and it's just moving. And so what a lot of the research said is if you had 2 years to wait, it would probably clear up. The turbidity and the release would probably go back to some kind of equilibrium. But of course, when it's your sole water supply, no one has the inclination to not use their water for 2 years or be exposed to potentially harmful levels. So I kind of wrapped in this concept of a blasting plan, that they had to say, what explosive products they were proposing to use, talk about what kind of best management practices they were going to use in terms of how they were going to set the blasting protocols, the loading, the muck pile management. That's the stuff once they do the blasting, like, does it have to be on sheeting? Should it be covered? What distance should it be from people's, wells, et cetera? So basically a plan, like what are you gonna do and how are you gonna do it? And then requiring this baseline duration and then post-completion monitoring and of a butter's wells. And then the hard part is, okay, well, when do you decide that either the project needs to stop or that some kind of mitigative action needs to be taken? And so I just winged it for right now, because this is a straw horse, and so that, if results collected during or following completion of the blasting result in an exceedance of a maximum contaminant level, primary or secondary, that would be an, immediate cessation and need for mitigation. Or if there's maybe a greater than 25% change, because there's always, there's always going to be differences in your water sample. So you could take a water sample today and have 1 part per billion of zinc, and you could take it in a week and you could have, 1.2, or it could be non-detect. So there's always going to be some variability. So this is not set in stone, but I was trying to come up with something that if there was degradation of, I said 25%, difference between baseline. And mitigation doesn't necessarily even mean drilling a new well. It could be simply, putting a filtration system on, because if it's something that's not exceeding a standard and it's not particularly toxic, but it's definitely higher, it could have an aesthetic, a taste or an odor issue that isn't going to hurt you, but is nonetheless damage to the quality of your drinking water. So the devil will be in the details, but I think some concept of, if it's degraded, then something should be done to try and get it back to what it was before the project occurred. And what constitutes degraded, I think, is going to be something that's up for discussion. So I just threw out 25% as a starting point. And again, that doesn't mean that it has to be a significant expenditure or very, lengthy. Like I said, some of these things might be a really easy fix, but that it really should be borne by the applicant, because they're the one who are going to be deriving the benefit from the construction that's going on, and the abutter shouldn't have to, pay the price for that. So I was trying to weigh that.
So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I didn't have a lot of time to spend looking, but I wasn't able to find any examples of maybe what other states or towns are doing.
New Hampshire
that
has a
other than,
New Hampshire.
Yeah, New Hampshire
That one,
DES.
yeah.
Yeah, that's where I sort of looked at the
Oh,
most.
right, but
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
focusing on blasting very much, which would then be the perchlorate issue versus strictly the disruption of ledge.
No, but they
which
talk
is
about both.
another-
They talked about both.
Yeah, and the problem is that like, I was talking to a hydrologist a couple weeks ago, and the problem is that the rock has different composition in different
Right.
locations.
Mhm.
And the problem is that some rock actually has arsenic. and
Right, well, I included
lead,
that, yeah.
and in addition to the manganese and other things that aren't routinely tested but can be very toxic and associated with public health risks that are significant. So even though it might be blasting that we don't do in Sherborn, it has the same end result because the pulverization of the rock, whatever method you use, and then deposition of it in the rock, in the surrounding ground, deposits it in the overburden, and okay, it's in the overburden, but the problem is these are elements. And so when it rains and,
Yeah.
other,
Well, so
it's
my
just going to
concern was
leach
that-
over time.
It's actually
the
in
potential.
the groundwater, though.
Right, it's-
They're
it's
breaking
actually-
up the
right,
rock
exactly.
that's
It
in the
gets-
groundwater
gets
already. So
directly
it's
into the
already,
ground.
it's moving.
Right, and if you have
in-
fissures and
Yeah.
other things that,
Right, fractures.
then it's even more.
So I had a pretty long list of the inorganics, too. I
Yeah.
mean, I included nitrate, lead, arsenic, barium, cadmium, chromium, copper, manganese, iron, and total dissolved solids. Because based on my background as a geologist and, just knowing like what's common in the rocks themselves, plus the toxic, what are the things that are potentially we're gonna be concerned with. Like, I didn't deal with like the sodium and the sulfate and the chlorates. They're not very toxic, and they're all around us anyway.
I mean,
so.
I'm wondering if we should even require that it be removed.
What do you
Because
mean?
pulverizing it and then leaving it there, how
Well,
does
they
that
are-
differ
New
from
Hampshire
the
requires you
toxic?
to remove it.
Yeah, no, well, that's why I said
Waste.
muck pile management. So that's like, so you
That's that
take it out
stuff.
of the ground,
Yeah,
and then you have to, until you remove it. No, I was contemplating that they would have to remove it.
yeah,
Yeah.
because I think that's, I mean, because we drink, our water sources, supplies are coming from these areas. I don't know how that differs from General Chemical. We're pulverizing rock and just putting it into the ground.
Oh, it's different.
But
They're
what I mean is,
solvents.
but I'm just, okay, solvents,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
if you're putting something that's potentially toxic or.
But it's already in the ground.
Right,
It's,
so
You're not putting, you're
Yeah,
changing
yeah,
the dynamic.
yeah.
But it's, okay, you're changing the dynamic because the levels, for example, the one case that was presented a couple weeks ago that is an abutter. That case came before our board. In that particular case, those levels were significantly higher than levels that arise in nature. So that, in the absence of another explanation,
Right, but that's because when they broke up the rock, they pulverized it, and then portions of that dissolved, and then it moved in the fractures, and it got into the well.
no, I understand that. What I'm saying
But the
is-
rock was always there, so,
No, of course, but
Yeah.
what I'm saying is if we pulverize the rock, that pulverized rock should be removed, not deposited.
right.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
no, but
so
that's,
we're
that
saying
was
the
part
same
of
thing.
that.
So we're saying the same thing.
Right, that was
Definition of
part of my
removal.
muck
Yeah.
pile management, is that,
Yeah. I'm just
while
not-
you're accumulating it, they should keep it on like plastic
Yeah.
and covered, and then, when the project's done, they should remove it.
Yeah.
So, that's all.
Or remove it along the way. So, I can see some of the tricky things will be, at what point does it look, what if it looks like the groundwater is becoming so contaminated and the project's not done? And
Oh,
so
well,
they
no,
keep
I said,
going.
no, I said cease
Yeah.
and so if at any point during the monitoring, an exceedance of an MCL becomes apparent, the project stops. It
Mhm.
doesn't, it's not allowed to continue. So, and I also tied in that if abutters notice, like, so let's say it's only a 2-week project, or maybe it's a 4-month project, and things have been going along okay, but then all of a sudden, someone notices, whoa, okay, like I just turned on my faucet and it's so turbid and it smells like sulfides and I can't drink my water, then, there has to be a notification that, something's going on, and that at least for an interim period, that the work stop, maybe take a sample, see what it is, and then they're gonna have to mitigate if there's you know, any problems that are found. So I think, yes, it's gonna be a tricky situation, but there has to be a stop mechanism. We don't want an unfortunate situation getting worse. So we don't wanna allow something to continue when it's obviously causing a problem.
So then the timing of the periodic sampling
Yeah.
is going to be important
Well,
in
right.
terms of catching something before it goes too far.
Right. I don't know, 2 weeks seemed like, I don't, you know, you can't do it every day. That's unreasonable. But some time period. And again, I just was throwing things out because we gotta start from
Right.
something.
So the other thing I was looking at was just where to even have this kind of regulation. And I'm not even sure it fits into the Board of Health because it involves site work. And that's
Maybe
really
it's-
not
So,
what we
okay,
do.
so
and
Cons-
we're-
Building,
You asked me to consult with the Massachusetts Association of Health Boards president, and I did that. And she said that's not true. She said it is absolutely Board of Health, because if water supplies down gradient from something, some activity of any sort is permitted by the town, and the Board of Health has not proactively done something, the town is susceptible to liability risk. So a permit that's given by the town for something without the Board of Health involvement is our responsibility.
Okay, so I wasn't
And I
trying
think
to avoid
maybe
the
what we should do, I
responsibility,
know,
but.
but maybe,
hold-
or the town, I don't know, whoever gives that permit, it's not, the Board of Health needs to be involved with acknowledging or preventing risk to drinking water, because that's a true public health risk. It's the same thing as like somebody having chickens. If there's an identifiable risk, we have the authority, even though it's private property, to say, you can't do that because you're potentially endangering
well,
public health.
we can't say that after they've gotten the permit though. So that's why we're trying to come
Right,
up with
so
a
it has to
mechanism
be involved with
to,
the permitting process, or else,
a separate permit.
Right.
I don't know. No, she wasn't, I'm not sure that it has to go before the Board of Health, but, you know, the permitting process has to be proactively addressing risks to public health.
Okay, so let me explain.
And maybe
Where I
what we
was
really
headed-
need to do is get a consultation and not just me giving you secondhand information.
Yeah, I mean,
Town council.
Right.
We
Yeah.
have a groundwater protection bylaw, Chapter 21 of town bylaws. And so that covers a variety of issues, including threats to groundwater in general. How materials are stored and handled. There's the most recent addition to, underground storage tanks were an issue. And that's, I think, the driver for when it was added to the bylaws in 1992. And then it was amended in 93, I don't know what for. In 2006, I did work on some of the amendments that were added then. The last one being manure regulations, and that's all about anticipating how manure might affect surface and groundwater and drinking water. So I think it might fit into that. And then it's an issue of, right, who would actually issue this kind of a permit? I don't know that it would be Board of Health, but it seems like in another town, it's fire department when they're dealing with blasting agents, and it might be building inspector or zoning or planning board or something.
Just before you go too far down that road, I was part of a project in Norfolk, and we had a blast, all right? And the requirements of the blaster were set by the state. I don't know if you've looked in that direction for guidance. If you haven't, then I'll stop talking. But if you haven't, going from that end of it, all right, the requirements that are put upon the person who is blasting, I think would inform you quite a bit, because they're quite onerous, all right?
but that's more dealing with like improper detonation and
No, it's also talking about secondary effects and effects on butters and so forth, and I don't know if the well issues in there, I know that, they're required to go to a certain circumference and do a crack inspection and a property inspection of pre-blasting,
Right.
post-blasting and so forth. All I'm suggesting is that there could well be within those same regulations, something that you would want to attach to or be informed by. and I don't know, I haven't heard you say that you looked in that direction, but
Um,
I know that
no.
they're quite specific coming out of, I believe, maybe it's the state fire marshal that sets them, but
Mm-hmm.
they're very specific.
Right, yeah,
Right, which is how I think the authority, for the town that has done it, did it through the fire department in terms of control, because the fire marshal, state fire marshal often passes on
Well, they're
certain
the ones that-
responsibilities like
They're the ones that grant the license, the permit.
flammable liquid storage
I just didn't want you
tank
to miss that.
permits and things like that.
Yeah.
I doubt that they've addressed it from the perspective of water quality, but certainly safety and maybe what can and cannot be used.
But
Glass
also more
cages.
specifically, they have to be insured for secondary effects, if you will. All right. And so if you're looking to, you know, assess blame and then get funds to do restitution, you have it there.
Right, but we're trying to also make it so it doesn't even get to the point that
It's a
ship
problem.
sails, right, so,
Right,
we're,
right,
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 and they're,
right.
and they just weren't contemplating, like the
don't
big
think-
issue that we're
Yeah.
dealing with right now is, it's not the blasting agent, it's the rock
Oh, I
itself,
understand
just
that.
getting, yeah.
It's the effect
Yeah.
that you're having. I was also very much taken by a comment you made, that if you hit a certain detection level, through one of these 2 weeks, everything stops. Well, the question has to be asked, there has to be a mechanism to start again.
Yep.
In the absence of a mechanism to start again, I can tell you that nobody
Right.
can start at all.
Response action, you know, is if the response
And
action's
it may
taken.
be, you know, when I think about that, I could think about not just you start again on the same path, but there are more engineering solutions for building on ledge than there is for cleaning up groundwater. So,
All I'm suggesting is if you have a mechanism that says you must stop.
Yeah,
you must have a
absolutely.
mechanism that says
Yep,
this is how you.
how does it get
This is how
rectified?
you can keep, this is
Yep.
how you can finish. you
Yep.
know?
Which is the reason that I think it's important that we plan ahead and not let it get to that point. In other words, we should be smart about the planning of the process so you don't have that happen.
But it's still.
once you have ledge disruption,
Yeah.
except for some of the precautionary measures, but there's still going to be particles and whatever that you're not going to capture in a pile.
Not
and that-
100%, ever,
Yeah,
ever,
so-
so, yeah.
um,
So, if I may, I have
Yeah.
a couple things. With regard to what Peter was saying, and, you know, who's the board to handle this and so on. I think it's a real question, because you're talking about, blasting has its own set of things that it might produce. What happened to me, and I think part of what you're focusing on, is the newer technology of, whatever those things are called, right?
Hammers.
And-
It's actually a
Yeah,
hammer.
yeah.
Okay, well,
Pulverization, yeah.
big giant things that.
Big hammer.
pulverize the rock. And I think, one of the first questions that should be asked, and I think you are the board to ask it, in the same way that conservation would be the board to address if someone was gonna disrupt wetlands. Why, if you have a plot of land and there's ledge here and you're building a house here, why are you building a house here when there's this rest of this 3/4 or plot over here that you can build a house? And, or whatever it is you're building, and not disrupt this ledge and therefore not cause the possibility of fouling someone's water. And I think it's reasonable to think that that would be the first step, an inquiry about what are the circumstances that are causing you to do this? Do you have a choice? You know, it would seem that there is one, or is there something about well and septics that's gonna be a problem, or, you know, but that would seem to be the first question, and it would seem that would be your jurisdiction, to me, I don't know.
Could also be a planning.
Yeah.
Although I do envision through the groundwater protection bylaw that roles and responsibilities could be specified within that. Because then it does seem to me that it has to be multi-department
Yeah.
who gets involved.
Yeah.
Because as land gets more and more precious, we're trying to use more marginal lands, and that's why they're starting to see this problem now, because as projects are involving all this massive change to the surface, whereas before, you know, everybody worked around it, so.
But if it's reasonable to decide where a well is best, why can't we also reasonably say maybe it's better to put the house over there or somewhere, you know, rather than saying, oh, sure, go ahead. Oh, gee, now we have a problem that we can't fix.
Yeah, although I'm just not sure how we'd have to think about how that could even be articulated, because,
Yeah.
you know, like that it should be the last choice when you don't have any other choices that you do the blasting, so.
So what I'm thinking,
A
though,
hierarchy of some kind.
part of this ratchets up the visibility of the potential liability that somebody would have by pursuing this. So hopefully it makes folks think twice about, gee, is there a way I could structure this differently so that I don't have to go
Exactly.
down this path where I've got this whole unknown, you're saying you're gonna shut me down, and I'm gonna be responsible for other people's drinking water in the
Well, I think-
long term,
Yeah,
and
that's what
I
it's
don't know.
shutting down part, you're saying about, some period of time where you're gonna retest and so on, and I'll just refresh your memory that I tested my water, the pulverized rock in August, I first tested my water in November. I didn't test it earlier, I probably should, but I tested first in November and it was 2.14. I tested it again in January because it tasted so bad, late January, and it was 5.45.
Right, but you didn't have a baseline test, and what
Yeah,
we're,
I do,
so.
I had.
Right, so I have, in addition to exceedance of standards, that if there's a significant delta between the baseline and what you're seeing, and I was suggesting or proposing that they have to be sampling during the project and then, like a week after the project, so not wait and see what happens. That if there's a delta, then that also needs to be addressed. So even if it's not above a standard, but it's clear that it's been impacted and degraded to some proportion, then still some kind of,
And
mitigation.
I was suggesting that in addressing Peter's
Yeah.
issue, in my case, it's not likely that the project would proceed because it continued to increase. If I'm actually thinking to test it again now just to see where I am. I can't do anything with it anyway, but just to
Yeah.
see where I am.
Yep.
But, we're a full, I don't know, where are we, 10 months from August or something, or is it 8 months from August? So, then that project would still be on hold now, and.
No, it wouldn't, because what this says is if that happens, they stop and they do the mitigation that's needed, and then they probably also have to go back and change their, whatever the method that they were doing clearly had an impact. So we can't tell them, oh, go, and when you fix that well, go back and do it again, because it's still obviously gonna be some kind of problem. So it is.
I want there to be a solution, and I really do, and that's why I'm here. I still don't know so if I had put a treatment system, someone, anybody, to pay.
Not necessarily even treatment, it might mean installing a new well.
I get it.
Yeah.
But let me just,
Yeah.
if I installed a treatment system in, November, which is what we were looking at that time, it would not have handled the amount of manganese that I have now. So if someone had said, that's cool, I'll do that, I'll mitigate it now, I'll just put it as, down the road, it could be more, right? If I drill a well, if I had drilled a well in November instead, or.
A new well,
Well
yeah.
now, and now up the hill for me, he wants to do it again, right, which is part of what brought this up, there's something like a foot of ground to ledge up there, and he's now subdivided and he's gonna do it again, right? So, if I drill a well today, and he pulverizes more ledge, who's to say that in 6 months or 2 weeks or a year, whatever it is, my second well is not going to be pulverized? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not a
And so-
big fan of thinking that moving the well is a solution, unless you're moving it 5 miles away.
Yeah.
But
I would.
within a
I would-
property-
I would like it to be one because I would like to have a solution to my problem.
Right.
now.
Right.
And I'm not trying to be difficult, I'm simply just saying, I don't know what the solution would actually be that the person responsible would.
Or even, there could be sentinel wells that are, are just, that means it's just like a monitoring wells that are put like in close proximity, so not at the abutter's house, but right at maybe the edge of the work area, that they could also be monitoring. I mean, there's a host of things. I mean, I just don't, I don't think we can outright prohibit it.
I think it would probably be a huge hurdle
Yeah.
in the current state of freedom of choice
Right.
and
So I think we wanna
tragedy
make
of the
people
commons, but
be as thoughtful and judicious about its use as possible. And then if it's gonna happen, that it be done in a manner that's gonna minimize the potential for these kind of issues. So whether it's the technique that they use, or some kind of, even you can install, like hydraulic barriers, so that, like, while you're doing the blasting, they could even put in, like, basically wells that would just keep pumping the water so it would stay on that property. I mean, there's a million things that could be done, but if we make it difficult enough, we're gonna make it a choice of last resort, which I think is a good thing, just because of our potable, water supply concerns. So I think it's okay to do it, but we have to come up with something that's workable, that's, legal, and that is not so punitive that it's gonna be, basically inhibit any development, because, that's not gonna serve our town either. So it's gonna be a balancing act, and, there's not an easy.
hydraulic barrier would be quite a disincentive, because putting one of those in an area of ledge
Yeah.
would be.
I know, like I said, we're just putting up like ideas right now versus having a clear.
But I also think that, Mr. Stevens seems like a nice guy. He doesn't want to damage the environment or put people at risk. So, it's in everybody's interest to be smart, to make smart decisions. If you have, in a river inlet, like put the house where the tide comes in, you put it up from the flood zone. It's just logical, smart planning when you're in that area, is to understand where you're building and what the risks are. It's not unusual. It's just something we haven't done very often. And it's an unusual circumstance to drink the water. A lot of other towns can avoid the risks because their drinking water is coming from far away.
Or they don't have ledge or pressures on development. So
But
I
I
think I think Newtown, Connecticut potentially also had a very serious issue with a big shopping development or something like that.
Well,
That had, some of the things you mentioned about cracks in people's foundations. Now their basements were getting flooded, their water was discolored, tasted bad, a whole series of things but they've had a heck of a time.
yeah, I mean, but New Hampshire, I liked it because, well, they have a ton of ledge and granite, obviously, it's the granite state, so this is something they deal with a lot. But about 35% of the state is supplied by private wells. So they understand the issues related to having ledge disruption and blasting occurring in very close proximity to people's only water supply. So, I mean, they don't prohibit it, but I mean, I think that they're probably the kind of the closest on a state level to the situation that we're talking about, so. And they approach it by some kind of, plan. What are you gonna do? How are you gonna do it? Here are all the best management practices that you need to consider, coupled with some kind of monitoring program. So that if there's a problem, it's identified quickly, and that something can be done about it, and maybe modifications to the plan need to occur before work can start again. So, I think it is workable. It is not gonna be easy.
No, because, and again, as Art has mentioned, there's almost like a wave of you don't know when you've hit the
Rock
worst
bottom,
of your.
so to speak. Sorry,
There
do not
you go.
resist.
Could be part of the slogan for promoting this educational outreach on what it means to disrupt ledge, so. So,
What's our next step?
so here's a question. So, right, I took what's the kind of narrowest thing to do to, maybe get through more quickly, but still include the testing and detection and connection of baseline conditions and conditions influenced by the activity of ledge disruption. So, just as maybe a way to approach this, do we want to do this stepwise, where we try to get something in place fast that might be a little easier to get in place fast, or do we just want to go for the more developed plan of laying out more of a
Process.
I
yeah,
would be-
process and what happens, and also shifting more of the burden to, for the actions of monitoring. Certainly follow-up, I would always want to be shifted onto the project proponent, but even for the monitoring to start right off the bat with that, I don't know, do we want to target like 2 phases, or do we just want to dive in and?
I would dive in and do 2 phases. Had to start with something. I think we need something because we don't have anything right now, and it could potentially be serious, and it's only going to be in our advantage to now that we've addressed the problem, to actually act on it. But I think that we could amend it after
Yeah.
we've had the opportunity to thoughtfully go through the issues, to consult with the town council, make sure that we're inconsistent with other states that have similar procedures in place.
I mean, I'd like to piggyback on
But I
work
don't
done
think
by
we
others
should
would be
wait
nice, but-
when we have serious potential.
Don't we
Risks.
have to have council look at this before we?
Of
yeah,
of course.
and
No,
yeah.
but we have to
What I meant is,
write something, so
Right,
the
right,
question
right,
is, do we
right.
want to do the, I don't know how many months it'll take to do a more complex one. I'm not just because I wrote this, I'm not advocating that way, but I do see them as different timelines to get something in place, only because you can imagine the gazillion questions that will come up. Public hearing, and just to let you know, so the other piece of what I had was, basically weaving it into the groundwater protection bylaw, just basically saying that there needs to be a permit. As part of that permit application, you don't get issued the permit until you've demonstrated that you've notified abutters of what's going on, and then there's some language that could go out to abutters saying that there's going to be this kind of work done at this particular property. And I didn't have just abutters, but I had,
Radius.
2/10 of a mile or something, or 1/4 of a mile, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's, I
Of
mean,
properties around, notify people, tell them, get your water tested, here are the parameters we recommend, you can do others, here's the kind of lab to use, certified lab, Mass DEP. You have X number of weeks to do that, you just need to get the water sample taken, they don't have to have the results. Because the work is anticipated to start on or after, a date. And then, just like the green cards that come in, there has to be proof that that's been delivered, what's been delivered, and that it's been received by the property owners.
But then what happens?
And then it would be the homeowners who I had it, they're the ones doing it, so it's, it's still their burden to pay for it, depending on what you do.
Yeah.
It may not be terribly expensive unless you have the lab come out and collect the sample as well, that's more expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I
Anyway.
guess I don't feel as if it's appropriate for the homeowners to bear the expense of
No,
the
preparing
analysis.
for-
I
So
just,
then
I don't
maybe-
think that's,
Would an
Fair.
easy, maybe
Maybe it's
easiest
reimbursed.
first step is
Yeah.
that they are paid for that?
Yeah.
With a certain, we have to pick some certain number of parameters, right?
Yeah.
They can't also.
no,
do
we should articulate, like, here's the
sodium at the time or
required,
something
yeah.
else. And it may be, I also had a requirement that, if they were blasting, that they have a plan for the blasting and submit information about the
Blessing agents.
blasting agent, and that we just ban perchlorate
Oh, yeah, no, I
containing
had that as well.
agents.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
not
that's not even a
not okay.
discussion, yeah. no.
There are alternatives,
Yeah.
use them. I don't know if we're gonna see alternatives and that's why I thought just getting information about the composition, I don't know how much liability that puts on us, though. If we ask for the information, does that I think we could ask for it in the sense of it demonstrating that there is not perchlorate.
I don't, I mean, I
But
think
if
it's
we
perfectly
notice
fair-
something else in
appropriate.
there that seems completely
Right. But that's why I think.
inappropriate, but we may not know all the things that will someday be discovered to be inappropriate.
No, I don't think we
can't
should list them. I just think
profess-
that having
Yeah.
having them write a plan that says, here's what we're going to use.
And they
here's
provide an
what's the-
SDS.
An MSDS sheet,
So-
then, you know, that's fine. And if the permit's contingent on us reviewing the plan, saying, here's what we're gonna do, here's what we're gonna use, you know, look at it, then that's good, I feel.
And on the list of materials that you have, are those easily covered by, like, the RCRA 13 or something? So
No,
that
they're
it's a
not priority
package
pollutant,
price?
no,
Okay.
it's not, because
So,
it's minerals that are, but the metals
They're like
themselves.
$15
Yeah, they're,
a test,
each
so-
one is not that
and how many
expensive.
did you come up with?
I came up with, well, I said nitrate, which is different, lead, arsenic, barium, cadmium, chromium, copper, manganese, and iron. So I have like 8 metals, and then total dissolved solid, which is getting at like the whole turbidity issue, and then, the, nitrate, because that can
Okay,
also
so
be.
let's say at least $150 per household.
And then coliform, because too, that can also,
Okay, so
Yeah.
maybe close to 200 per
And-
household.
and then only-
depending
and
on
then
how
the
many-
VOs
And that every 2 weeks for the duration, and how long after, we'd have to decide that.
yeah, like, I don't know if it would be a week or 2 weeks after the project's done. Not right after, you definitely want a little
Yeah.
lag time, so. Yeah, we can come up with
Because
that.
if, yeah, but that's another.
But again, if you're doing a project that's on the scale of, I need to do ledge disruption for 2 months, that's a gigantic project. That's
Yeah.
not a single-family home. You're talking about a multi, you know, lot, large development that probably has millions and millions of dollars at stake. So if you're telling someone, it's gonna cost you $5,000 to do monitoring, that's
Yeah.
life, you know, I mean, I don't know, it's.
Yeah, we also have to,
Mary, you just described a couple of weeks and about $1,000 per household and talked about a quarter-mile radius. That's not $5,000.
No, I said a butters.
Oh, okay, you said a butter.
And I
You
said
up to
distance.
quarter mile,
Yeah.
and the president
I had
again made,
2/10 of a mile, but I don't know what.
Oh, no, but I mean, look at our lot size too, though, I mean, it's.
but also, you know, can you identify down gradient receptors? And go to those receptors?
Well, that's why I thought, if you start with,
No.
Yeah.
yeah, and also with the
Too hard to
fractures, you
know.
can't do that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if the abutters aren't being adversely impacted, there's no way someone even further away typically is gonna be, like, I think we have to, it's a balancing act.
Yeah.
So I think 95% of the time, if you focus on the abutters, you're focusing on the right stuff.
Is because so, there was ledge pulverizing right next to where he built his well.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, in our first meeting when I was here before, you guys said, no, it was on the other side, no, that it was right next to where he pulverized. I went back.
His well.
His well.
Yeah.
The drilling of his well. So, that stuff, and his well goes down 650 feet. It's a hugely deep well.
Mm-hmm.
So, who's to say that that stuff is not able to get into his well when he's drilling it?
Well-
Or that there's no other pathway into, I'm just saying, with the argument about abutters and people farther away, there may be the possibility that that it's gonna get into the aquifer or wherever that water is coming from. And, you know, that doesn't mean that, 3 doors down is not on that same.
No, but so abutters to where the ledge disruption, so that would include wells all around it, so, and also, if he's drilling new wells, he can't get them, he can't get the certificate of occupancy and use until he tests those wells, and we require that data for any new wells,
My
yeah.
well might be fine, my white well might be fine, but my across the street neighbor's well might be foul.
Mhm.
Because I'm abutting him, I'm challenging.
Yeah, we have to,
the
we're gonna have to figure out what makes sense in terms of the
Right.
monitoring.
Yeah. The
Um,
other thing was the 2-week thing. You have to, I think you need to think about not sure when my levels really started to rise quickly, or, you know, at what point I started to taste it, you know what I mean? I don't know what the level was when I started to taste it.
Right.
But I know that, you know, August to late November or mid-November, you know, 2.5 months before there was a real, I mean, a hugely different, level. So, you know, and if it's, I guess what I'm saying is it's okay in 2 weeks.
Right, I don't,
It's
right,
okay.
maybe end 3 months subsequent or something, like, we'll have to,
Yeah.
this is just, like I said,
Oh, I
just,
know.
yeah.
I'm just
you know,
trying to
yeah,
contribute.
yeah.
And it
I mean-
could also be once some well owner notices a change,
Right.
color, taste, odor, something else. Not that that's the way you want to do it by, oops, somebody's
Yeah.
drinking
Well, you
something
could-
for a
you
while,
could
but
that's a-
say, like, that must be
At least it
within a
would-
month, unless someone notices a change, in which case that would trigger a test.
yeah.
You know.
I think that should always be in there as
Yep.
a way to capture.
I have.
Yeah.
After 2 days, things have gone kaflooey.
Well,
you
right,
shouldn't
I
be
mean, if you
drinking
can,
that
if you
and-
can notice it
Yeah.
Right.
physically, then you know that it's probably an issue.
So I was trying to think of a way to do a map, but I'm never gonna figure that out. But to me, I think a radius would be better, because
For fracture.
I didn't get a good drawing. But anyway, so you have a property and work is going on, but let's say this is the direction it flows, but the abutters' wells aren't in that
Yeah.
line. So
Yeah,
Well, that's why.
there's
I mean,
something
the-
about,
Yeah.
a radius. It's-
yeah, that's just doesn't depend on the weird lot shapes and just exactly what's lined up
Yeah,
with
that's
what.
fine,
And especially the one we saw today, right? That new lot that's almost hourglass and
Yeah.
extended and the
Yeah.
paddle at the
But
end.
I also think we
So-
have to remember, we're not just trying to create burdensome, onerous, procedures, because the economic burden on the poor individual who now has to replace her well and potentially has some serious health consequences is much more than a preventive measure. So
Which
that's,
is- yep.
Yep, I mean,
Yeah.
that's why
It's putting
I do think
the
putting the
responsibility back
responsibility
where-
on the applicant makes a lot
Okay.
of sense. So whether they pay the people back or they do, they are responsible for handling, I don't know,
Mhm.
that's a detail and actually
Yeah.
not as important.
I
Yep.
think part of what, whichever board would say, you need to think about where to put your building, because here is Ledger Up and here is Ledger Up. Trask had those, 12 acres, 2, 2, 2, and 6. And for a while, and I'm still not really sure, but I couldn't figure out why I couldn't want to right next to me. Couldn't figure it out. It's like, there's 6 acres from this. Why put it right where we can see, these people? And I'm sure we had intended all along to subdivide and, end up with 6 houses on 12 acres, right? But I don't know what the rest of that property, what the rest of it looks like. And I'm just saying, it might have been, or it could be in another instance, that there's so much ledge in there that it's really not possible to subdivide. And so that person buying that property, thinking they're going to subdivide and put in 3 houses reasonably, because it's 6 acres and it's 2 acres of land, whatever, actually then is prevented from doing so. Because, my well is fouled, I'm trying to deal with him now about a month. But there's this 2 acre, now he's gonna go do it again, so even if I solve my problem now, as I said before, who's to say, what's gonna happen with the next one? So it makes sense to me to try to, make that be part of the forward-looking thing, also to protect someone who wants to build, They can be aware of what's going on, so whether or not they can build.
Tricky. I think
I'd like it to be all about me, but, Just-
For those properties in particular, there was so much testing done there. I don't think anyone could have missed the ledge
Well,
presence.
Oh, you can see it, it outcrops.
they
so-
knew what was
No, but nobody, but, you know,
Yeah.
there wasn't any regulation that said, you know,
Right.
Yeah.
oh, by the way, you're
This
not gonna
can-
build here, here, here. You can only build in this weird hourglass
Yeah.
shape thing because there's wetlands here and there's ledge.
Yeah.
And I don't know what depth the ledge, I'm not sure. I
Um,
haven't seen actually. That would be involved or something.
And it would fit in with some of the master planning
Yeah.
issues of groundwater being important because the value, well, our health and then the value of our properties depends on that.
Yeah.
So, some momentary gain in one place could cost the rest of us everything we've got. So,
I don't know what pH spikes in your list of things,
it is an issue for,
but, you know, one of the things that's, you know, secondarily true is that, and I didn't even realize it when I was in here, the fixtures are,
Corroding.
yeah, I mean, there's damage being done to my property. I'm not drinking my water, I'm not bathing my water, it's really inconvenient,
Yeah.
but I'm healthy, I hope. But my house is fine, you know, I'm in a worry, and I'm worried about it, so the longer it goes on, without being,
did they measure pH? Is it going up or down?
you were gonna ask me that. I can't remember which way it goes, it's going, but it's really changing.
So what did you say is happening?
Corrosion.
To your
Yeah,
fixtures,
well,
meaning like your faucet?
It's eating, it eats away at your pipes, you know, so your pipes corrode and you get pimples, and, you know, it's the same thing as like copper, you know.
Wow.
And my porcelain, I mean, when there's bleach, and I didn't know, and, you know, put bleach in my water, and I mean, it's really hard to get that off. Again, I didn't know that initially, so I wasn't like, and I have people clean home, but I'm not, shining my sinks all the time, so I wasn't, and I have had copper before in my water sometimes where it gets filthy, and, you know, it's not hot, so I'm not, but it's difficult to remove. I still haven't really found something that is removing it all, but I will. But I mean, it's an issue, it's not, I happen to live in an old house, I live in 1931 Arts and Crafts bungalow, so my fixtures are older. And I don't know if this would be happening at all if I had, you know, fiberglass surround type of thing, but I don't. I have beautiful old porcelain, which right now is brown, you know, so, I don't know where I was going with that, sorry.
No, but
I
it's,
started.
no, it's other effects. It's
Yeah.
not, right. It's not just health risk, and it's not just cost of remedying that problem, the health aspect. It's infrastructure too.
Yeah. Oh, pH, that's where I just started.
Yeah.
I know pH has a lot to do with that also.
So,
Okay.
do you want to take a shot at combining pieces and, or how do you want to do this?
I don't know, maybe we have to meet and
Okay,
actually,
we can discuss.
yeah, try to figure out how to do that,
Okay.
so,
You would,
okay.
and thank you
Yeah.
very much
No,
for addressing it.
sorry that you had to be the impetus.
Oh,
I'm the
so-
canary, I'm the canary.
Yes. So we're going to be talking about 59 North Main just in general for
just
other
if I
things,
can-
but just to let you know, at that meeting, the ZBA did ask if they were planning to do any blasting
Yes.
or ledge
Oh.
removal work as part of the project, just to alert them. They said they didn't anticipate it because they hadn't really encountered anything there that they were concerned about, but the issue was brought up, so to let them know, we will not have this in place such that we could apply it there anyway, but I thought that was good.
Well, that second lot might be subdivided
Couple things on the ledge disruption. 527, the state regulation for blasting is 527 CMR 1. It's based on mostly safety, fire department rulings,
Yeah, 527.
but some of that structure could be looked at, it's like pre-review. We could maybe look at how they do it, how they go about the charge, and what happens if you have damage. You know, we could look at it as a framework, more or less. The other note is on these regulations, maybe we could have these potential regulations, a hydrogeologist kind of give us an idea of the migration pattern that could be expected after everything's done. Could it take a few weeks, a few months, a year? You know, I know Lisa's a geologist, and maybe she knows of someone that's a hydrogeologist that might have those.
The problem is that we're talking about rock. And so the flow in rock is really difficult to predict because of the fractures. And, you know, to get into bedrock mapping of fractures, if you think a few $100 for a water sample is expensive, it's gonna be really difficult. So I think that certainly for the overburden, we can, you know, come up with a deductive, you know, overall groundwater flow direction. But where people's drinking water wells are screened 200, 300, 500, 600 feet down, that's all fractures and you know, it's
All
gonna be
different ways.
exceedingly difficult. And then you're getting into, okay, what's the pump rate of all these wells and what's gonna be, you know, the
Zone of
likely zone of
contribution.
influence, right? So it can, if we get too in the weeds, we're never gonna get it
Sure.
done. So I don't wanna overcomplicate it. So we
Yeah.
should just make some conservative but reasonable
Yeah.
sort of, you know, I think, lines that we're trying to follow.
And just one other area within our own regulations. It's interesting, while we were talking, I looked up ledge disruption, local regulations. Our regulations show up as the first discovery under a Google app. So I started trying to find out where the word ledge disruption comes in, but I believe it may be, because I looked through a few of our chapters, it could be in our environmental health impact report requirements, which would be more for earth removal, but maybe definition of earth removal might also include that, but it was just interesting. Yeah, look up ledge disruption regulations. Sherborn Board of Health regulations show up first. I was like, wow, that's interesting. But again, we might want to use the framework, excuse me for my voice, we might want to use the framework within our environmental health impact requirements for some of the language that you might be looking for as well, in respects to what we would expect. And it even mentions groundwater flow studies. But again, that would not help with all properties, because one, if it's action not required lots, such as we're discussing, then we would have to think of another way to address ledge disruption. But again, it's just different areas to look at for framework, and maybe see if Mass Association of Health Boards might have some suggestions as it relates to ledge disruption regulations. They're a good resource. And they'll allow their attorney, Cheryl Sabara, to give us some overview, but she won't act as our legal counsel. But at least we'll have someone that might know of another town having the same problem. Again, sorry for my voice.
I was just gonna underline that, it would seem that Lisa and I think all of you spoke about trucking out the ledge, the pulverized rock,
Yep,
and,
mud pile.
I think Rebecca, you said something about, you know, like, it's like if someone has chickens or there's no door or whatever, and it probably shouldn't have to be able to stay there at all. I mean, as soon as it's done, it should be gotten out.
Well, I mean, so, for example, when we're doing remediation at a site and we're digging up like impacted soil, you're not shipping it off-site every day. It's not, that's just not the way you do it, because sometimes you have to sample it, you have to find a receiving facility. It's not like, you know, remove it, and it's just every day it's coming out. Occasionally that's true, but like most of the time that's not. So what that means is while the project's going on, that it has to be managed in a way that it's not gonna be like, water's not gonna be getting on it and it's gonna be leaching into the ground or flowing, you know, off onto someone else's property. So there's ways, you know, you can put basically like poly and then cover it and slope it in a certain way so that, you know, until it is removed, that it's not gonna be impacting things to the extent possible. So there's lots of ways that it's pretty easy to, and yeah. Yeah, I mean, people do stuff like this all the time, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, very common.
Yeah, so, I mean, you know, I've done projects where you're moving around like 20,000 cubic yards of soil, rock, debris, all that stuff, so. Looks like
But
a mini-
people don't always, it sometimes is hard, you know,
Yeah.
covers blow and nobody pays attention to it and they don't weight it down to begin with and.
It would really have to be in some kind of a container that, and it's, we're talking about rock, so, I mean,
Yeah, it could be containerized and covered and.
and it would seem that if it's gonna be in a container,
Well, I mean, I think the big issue is that once it's generated, it's gonna need to be removed.
right.
And,
Don't you have to decide that there's a problem with it before you have to remove it?
no, I think that the point is that once it's in a pulverized state, it's not like, I mean, if someone had just like a giant boulder, that's very different than if they have what these muck piles are called, where they're,
Well, the muck
they're,
pile, yeah, that's
yeah,
all the
yeah.
grinding stuff, but.
right, so it's in such a state that it makes it much more susceptible to migration, to leaching, and the things that you're concerned about that could be dissolved metals and other things that could get into water. Yeah, so it's basically like a powder instead of a rock anymore. So it's much more of a concern for being a source of those metals and other things.
I'm a little confused, because you clearly haven't powdered all of it. I mean, you've got big chunks of rock and some powder, right?
It's a mix.
So
Okay, but-
there are two dynamics that can go on. One is that it gets dissolved,
Yeah.
so you just have more surface area,
You
so
could
there's
probably
more to
segregate,
dissolve.
though. You could
And then
segregate.
there's-
But by breaking it up, you're basically determining that it's a dangerous material.
Possibly.
We're determining that it's increasing the likelihood of contributing levels of certain metals that we don't want in our water supply.
But how do you know they're there?
Right, a question could be
That's my
whether.
point.
It's,
I mean,
known
you could sample it.
It could be very innocent rock, right?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a lot of sandstone around here. We definitely have more,
But
you know,
it's
like.
well
pudding
known
stone.
what, that certain types of rock arise in different states, in different parts of the state, and it can be sampled.
They
and-
could say, I mean, they could elect, you know, yes, they could sample it and say it's totally inert, but it's a lot simpler if we just say, you took something out of the ground that was not on the surface and was in a different form. And if you're gonna do that, you need to remove it, unless it's
Very often
boulders.
you want to put it somewhere else to create a roadbed or something. you know.
Well, if,
That's exactly the problem, that's right.
well,
That's-
sometimes. Yeah, I mean, if they're taking out rocks that are of a certain diameter, like 6 or 8 inches, you know, they're breaking like up a ledge, and some of those are like this, if they wanna use those in a stone wall, I think that's fine. But there's the muck piles themselves,
Yeah.
it's different, so they can maybe segregate the stuff that we're concerned about, that's really pulverized and is gonna be much more vulnerable, versus if they have rocks like this, and they wanna, like I said, if they wanna build a stone wall or something, I mean, it is no different than people's stone walls all over town,
Well,
so.
for instance, you should have seen the size of the rocks, size of the rocks that came off at the library are bigger than 3 of those chairs put together.
Right, so we're not talking about boulders, we're
Right,
talking about
but it's
muck
tr-
piles,
But
yeah.
it's true that during the library, the water supply of the town offices and the police station were contaminated, and the DEP gave a cease and desist order.
I
So,
understand that. There was a
yeah.
disruption by the.
So it's a problem, the reason we're having this conversation is that
Yeah.
we have to realize that
Right, so
these,
there's
we're
muck
talking about 2 examples, but what if it turns out that the geology of Sherborn is putting every single project at this risk? And we don't want to be in that situation because, Right now, it's,
But you also do not want to presume that every single project has that risk.
Hope it's not our
You'd like to have some way to determine if the project has a risk.
It would be nice,
yeah,
Yeah.
or if there isn't.
And it's
Right, and
ironic
that may be a condition of if you do an adequate amount of sampling of the material. So that would address the leaching. There might still be just the particles that, if they're fine enough, could actually be carried through the fractures and into a well. So,
Do you realize how
It
often
depends
you
on
say
which one.
could be, might have been, could be,
Yeah.
sort of, I'm not sure.
I'm sitting right here.
in medicine, we say could be,
I know it happened to you, I know, I mean, it's a perfect case of exactly how,
That
you
was
know,
used for building
pre-testing
material.
would have made a difference.
It was used for building material. It's there. That's part of why we don't know how long it'll go on and when it'll stop, because it's there. It's under the house.
but in medicine, we use those words all the time because you don't know a lot of the time. You have to
Well, but
take
you don't
precautions.
You don't take antibiotics every day, do you?
No, but you,
Because you don't want to take those antibiotics.
No, I mean,
Because you're not gonna be sick every day.
right, but we tell people to wash their hands. But so we do things because we know it decreases the risk of infections. We wash hands, we sterilize instruments, we wear gloves. We don't do that because I can prove
It's a
that,
false comparison. It's a false comparison.
I think we,
If
Okay.
that was the case, you shouldn't walk out the door every day because something terrible could happen to you.
it's gonna be a balancing act.
Yeah,
I definitely
right.
acknowledge that. And I think there's a difference between a rock and a boulder and muck. And I'm
Right.
perfectly, rock piles can be managed in a completely different way than the actual muck piles. And that would be an easy thing to segregate on, that's not that hard. We do things like this all the time in construction and remediation, so.
Yeah, the large rocks were taken out of there and they in fact built a wall.
Yeah.
which is-
Why
I think
not?
Actually was part of what was required anyway.
Yeah.
And so, you know.
Right, so, it's not all bad.
nor do we want to blindly stumble into enormous problems that we can't remedy and make the town and
Oh,
our
wait.
property
Oh, it's a-
values worthless.
Very, very complicated situation.
Yeah. But the muck might also be easier to sample and analyze, to know. You just have to sample enough of it so you don't miss something.
Might be nice
Well,
to
that's
just sample
about,
the rock before you even
vis-a-vis
bust it up and see
septic.
what's there.
Yeah, so it's in our septic
think.
regs.
Before
I
you
just
make
want to see if I
any
can find it. Thank you. It was just
Or
interesting.
we
how it showed
use
up.
engineering techniques and don't
Out
break it
there
up
on
at
the
all.
yeah.
Or cite things differently, or some of the maybe clustered housing options or whatever else is
You
being
know,
looked at, so you don't.
We had to learn a lot the hard way. 50 years ago, we didn't, we just sort of dumped things in the ground all the time, and now we don't do that anymore because we learned the hard way. So this might be an example of where we're starting to face new challenges because we haven't had this density of development before, but we can't ignore it.
So anyway, is everyone ready to move on to
Yeah, I'm ready.
another topic?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to bring up more of it, but.
No, it's all good, it's just that, I don't know if we want to do it all tonight.
No,
So,
We'll be here a
not
long
feasible.
time.
okay, so what else have we got? Matt was so excited about the flow chart for the building
Yeah, we can't
applications.
do
I think
that.
we should save that for when he
yeah,
comes
we
back.
gotta do that with Matt.
Okay. Okay, so that goes on the next agenda. Let's see, we did that one. All right, so a quick review of 59 North Main. What was it that we last looked at? So Mark and I went to
We
the
went to-
ZBA meeting.
The review checklist was revied with the.
Yes, that's it, review checklist. And what were some of they had some
The
questions.
major highlights, the change
I
in.
didn't bring my
any-
little notepad
Well,
with all
and
the issues.
they are creating a large sewer system per se for 12 homes. So they were concerned that, within our regulations, it says within any change in direction, you shall have a cleanout.
Mm.
And they were arguing the fact that, well, we have several of them, and then we started talking about cleaning those out and the concept of why we say no more than 100 feet, and that was discussed for a while. The type of system was a leaching bed without any pressure dosing or innovative alternative technology being utilized. And they said they would redesigned the plan, and they are choosing the Presby system pressure dose. So we haven't seen it, but
Right.
what the engineer did is he wrote side notes to the checklist that we sent out for the septic system plan. There are a lot of notes, and I agree, those can easily be put on the plan, but they're
But
required.
I think the beds was
The leaching
major
bed was the
concern,
major concern.
and they did address that, so that went okay. And then there was something else that we reached some,
Was it the wells? They have to do the standard plate count test.
yep, they're still missing some tests, so.
And agreement letter signed by the owner that he recognizes the volatile organic chemicals in the water,
Mhm.
or chemical, I think, I can't remember if it was just, I have.
Toluene?
Yeah, I think it
The
was.
toluene, so the chemical versus plural. And those are normal procedures we have for any,
And also
new
the
addition.
testing at the taps. So
Testing at the
They
taps,
were
yep.
objecting to that at first, but we explained the reasoning behind that. So in the end, it worked out, and
Yeah,
then
it
Mark,
seemed to be very
we're
good.
going to work together, and we got a copy of a plan,
One plan.
one plan just a few minutes
Today.
before the meeting.
Oh,
this
wow.
evening. So there
there's
is
the
one.
plan.
There is one for you to look at, and he said pending your review, and if there are changes needed, then the full plans would be, set of
That's fine.
plans would be printed out, so. So that's moving along, so,
Maintenance, standard operating procedures, those were discussed due to the fact that we don't just end with the final construction, it continues on with maintenance. So some discussion took place on SOPs, so we'll see.
right, and garbage grinders and
Yep,
education signage potentially.
the importance of doing tap test, all the plumbing is retested that way through the filters and the plumbing, so the importance of tap tests were discussed to some degree.
Right, so the main one, though, the bed adjustment was important because they're not even recommended under Title V, and that's what they were proposing, and they were saying, oh, but it's allowed, but it's not. It's only, as you pointed out, the language is
In our
something,
section on the builder's
if
responsibility.
something else isn't possible.
Last
It
resort.
is
kinda,
possible when it's a
yeah.
brand-new system.
There's
and
additional
site.
cost, but you get additional treatment. I think that's why the board allowed it, where leaching beds are only used where if it's not possible to use leaching trenches, is how they review, the state code reviews it. If not possible to use leaching trenches, then other types of units can be used for leaching facilities. And speaking with the state, they are obviously indicated that leaching trenches can be used for new construction because you can manage around your construction to set up an appropriate septic system with leaching trenches. So they have been getting better at defining that because it was kind of wishy-washy. And our regulations under section 1.2 of the septic codes explains it very well.
Right, and you've had conversations with Claire Golden and.
Yes, as well as with the
Northeast
engineer the day of the well
Regional
pump.
Office,
Well, and I spoke to Peter Bemis, the design engineer, the day we were doing the water testing, the well pump test. And I said, Peter, you can't use a leaching bed based, and, I had to get something out in writing, obviously, and I'm glad his engineer thought of another avenue.
So, okay,
That's
so
good.
that went pretty well, so.
Yep, I would say so.
Okay. I think all we have left is, so the Conservation Commission is trying to look at the health of wetland resource areas, particularly from the perspective of nitrogen loading from larger septic systems. And that first came up when they did the analyses for the fields at Sherborn. The loadings were going to be such that it would have exceeded any kind of carrying or absorptive capacity of the wetlands and would have degraded them. So that just raised their concern about, well, how might one go about that? And they were looking, I think, at If systems were above a certain size, they wanted to have some analysis of potential impacts if there was a wetland resource area on that project site. And we've talked about this issue before, is how to put more information into our regulations about shared systems that are larger, but not quite at the 10,000 gallon per day where they get regulated by the state. So they circulated something some time ago, but I have to say I didn't read through it because it wasn't clear how they might approach it. And I think now there are some monies that may be available through, I forget which route, where they can get outside assistance from some sort of expert to help look at the issue, and the planning board is interested in working with them on that, because it fits into just project planning, master planning. And I thought it might be a nice opportunity for the Board of Health to piggyback on that and get some input onto the things that we would also like to do. And it'd be one of those steps, wouldn't be everything, but it would be a step, perhaps to help us. So I just wanted to get a sense that we could let them know, because again, Concom and Planning Board are already planning to work together on this, and
Great.
so would we like to do that too?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And I don't know if, I think they might have been looking at, say, 2,500 gallons up to 10,000, so in that
And
range.
if I may, just on the cycle of the whole process, we're looking at septic systems in respect to conservation resources. But I would say on the other cycle, which we've discussed here, is private wells
Yeah.
being
Yes.
designed for these subdivisions, because they're drawing directly from the cycle of the sewage disposal to the resources, so maybe
Right, and
that could
that's,
be
you know,
part of
we
it.
The
would get to
broad-
have
that's
our
our
angle. We
piece, yeah.
wouldn't be participating only on a wetland
Wetlands,
issue.
right.
It would be
It's resources.
on the
Yeah.
size of these systems,
Yeah.
the potential intensity of impact in one kind of a smaller area. Right now, we're relying to some degree on dilution and distribution
Yeah.
from the way our systems are done. So these present a different kind of environmental challenge. So anyway, so do we have a motion to somehow collaborate? Oh, yes?
I have a question. What's the Conservation Commission's plan on actually being able to implement this? Do you know what that is?
I think it would be a review and analysis of wetland impacts. I mean, now they go out and they evaluate where the wetland borders and that kind of thing,
But
and
they're-
what's the
they're not-
Like
habitat.
through a regulation,
But they're
or?
not, yeah, it's not, they wouldn't have a regulation, they wouldn't have guidance on this.
No, I believe it would be
That's what's-
for some kind of a regulation that says, oh, if you're going to do that, you need to do this kind of analysis to assess the impacts. It would, I'm guessing, I don't know what other techniques there are, but it might be a lot like the
But you're
area
not
of
talking- you're not
impact
talking-
analysis.
You're not talking about Board of Health regulation changes then?
No, but maybe we, by participating, there would be some companion piece
Okay.
that we would be able to have that
And-
just,
To that end, I'm not, I think I'm pretty sure you were around when 1995 regulations were put in effect. And if you want to
Title
change
V.
your regulations to be anything more stringent than the Title V, all right, you have a very, very high bar to cross. You know that.
Mhm.
Okay, all right, I just wanted, because you can't just do it as we do with our own regulations and so forth. If it's a septic regulation since 1995, you're subject to DEP review and being able to prove the necessity by a preponderance of scientific evidence.
So, but when does the
Well, we
state
already have
right,
the
but
EHIR
DEP,
section, which to me is addressing the other things that aren't covered by Title V. So we already have that kind of thing in
And
place.
you had it in place. What I'm saying is, that since 1995, to do anything more stringent than Title V, you have this much higher bar to cross.
But
There-
DEP states, and have personally told me, that we have a responsibility to be more stringent than Title V because we don't have a remote water source that's monitored by them.
That may well be, I'm just saying, the process is not as straightforward as it was before 95. You now must get You now must pass it locally, and then it must be submitted to DEP, and it must be submitted with projects of scientific evidence demonstrating the necessity for that more strict requirement.
And that may be what this expert would be able
I
to
was just gonna
assist
say
with.
that.
So, and there's growing concern within the DEP about these kind of projects, because they saw them as big projects. I mean, all of the apartment complexes that used to take place always had their own package treatment plants, and now there have been ways found to get around that, and that just wasn't anticipated. So I think DEP recognizes that, so I am optimistic that they would at least
Wouldn't it be so much better if
understand.
DEP did something about it? Can DEP do something about it?
Everything starts
So
local.
do we want to just wait for that? Because
No, but
they're,
I'm just
they've
saying,
got their
are
hands
they
full
doing-
with
are they doing
short
anything
staff.
Except being concerned?
Some regions are. I'm
And they've,
not aware
and
of
they've
what
made
Northeast
multiple
Regional
amendments
Office is
to their
doing.
to the, you know, they've made multiple amendments to some of their policies, and it's definitely on their radar.
And sometimes you'll see it the other way around. The federal government will start setting standards that come down to the state and to the locals, so.
Probably not right now.
What's that? Probably not right now. No, but, you know, they're concerned about various, this is the various
We are
water
making
contaminants now, cyanotoxins and so forth that they're concerned about. So, and the feds have actually set up stricter standard testing for public water supplies as it relates to if any of those toxins are getting into public water. So there's still some leftover stuff at the federal level that was probably already in place. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. All right, so do we have a motion to just let the Conservation Commission know that we will somehow collaborate with them, to be determined exactly how that will be, but that we're interested?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay,
So moved.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Darrell, if you want it this way, unless you need me, I'm gonna go get the stamps. So I
Yes,
can-
perfect,
okay,
thank you. Okay, so we could sign warrants and payroll, and so we're just going to be, oops. We're just going to be signing some paperwork, so if, that's.
Would you tell the audience? that
Yes, so we are going to be signing and approving warrants and payroll, and the plans that we approved this evening need to be signed, so. Just paperwork from here on out, so thank you for being with us.